Chapter 3048. Along the way, Yi Shiwen encountered sky-devouring, ominous pythons that bumped into him from time to time. They were all awakened in the depths of the ancestral land and rushed to various places as reinforcements. Yi Shiwen concealed his aura, which allowed him to move around in this small world like a sky-devouring, ominous python without being repelled. However, if he bumped into them head-on, a great battle would inevitably break out. However, these sky-devouring, ominous pythons could not even stop Yi Shiwen from moving forward. In just a moment, they were all killed. Suddenly, Yi Shiwen killed all the way and finally arrived at the depths of the ancestral land of the sky-devouring, ominous python. He saw that the sky was blooming with rays of light, and there was endless vitality surging, as if it was about to materialize. Where the dragon vein is? Yi Shiwen immediately opened his eyes and suddenly remembered that there was a memory of this dragon vein in the previous sky-devouring, ominous python's memory. This was the core of the entire ancestral land of the sky-devouring, ominous python. This dragon vein could not only condense great luck, but it was also a collection of endless energy. The sky-devouring, ominous python's development to become an overlord of the stormy sea area was not unrelated to the location of this dragon vein. This was also the most important place in the sky-devouring, ominous python clan. Usually, there would be an emperor-level, sky-devouring, ominous python guarding it. Therefore, Yi Shiwen had never thought of taking this dragon vein from the beginning. When he fought with an emperor-level creature, regardless of victory or defeat, it could not be settled immediately. It was not like quasi-emperors where he could kill a bunch of them with one sword strike. At that time, it would inevitably alarm the entire sky-devouring, ominous python clan and cause unnecessary trouble. However, it did not matter now. Anyway, it had already been alarmed. Moreover, the most important thing was that Yi Shiwen sensed that an emperor-level sky-devouring, ominous python had already left this place and was rushing to other places to provide support. Obviously, the other battlefronts were in a tight situation. After all, Old Can and the others were experts of the Emperor Lord level. It was no wonder that the entire sky-devouring, ominous python clan was alarmed when a few experts of the Emperor Lord level barged in at once. Generally, only when two Overlord-level forces were in conflict would there be so many Emperor-level existences fighting. If this sky-devouring, ominous python was guarding here, it would be impossible for Yi Shiwen to seize the dragon vein. This sky-devouring, ominous python's ferocious aura was not inferior to his. It was impossible to deal with it in a short time. At that time, it would attract other Emperor-level ominous pythons. Now is the time. Yi Shiwen's heart was slightly moved, and his figure quickly jumped in. Suddenly, he felt an inexhaustible amount of yuan qi blowing against his face. This dragon's vein was indeed huge. It was unknown how many dragon's veins had gathered to form this dragon's vein. It was enough to build a powerful sect. Even Yi Shiwen hadn't found such a huge dragon's vein in the heavens and 10,000 worlds. Normally, even the members of the ominous python clan weren't allowed to approach this dragon's vein without permission. Yi Shiwen rushed all the way to the core area of the dragon's vein. This dragon's vein had already been refined by the fierce python clan. Any other clan that entered this place would immediately trigger a backlash. Almost at the moment when Yi Shiwen rushed in, a huge fierce dragon appeared from the depths of the dragon vein. It had a sinister look on its face as it bared its fangs and brandished its claws towards Yi Shiwen. Although this dragon vein had no intelligence, divine objects did. Moreover, it was such a heaven-defying divine object, so it immediately retaliated. Even an ordinary emperor would be severely injured by this terrifying power. However, this was nothing to Yi Shiwen. "Freeze!" Yi Shiwen shouted loudly. This vicious dragon was almost immediately fixed in place. Its huge body was constantly struggling in the water and stirred up endless waves. However, it was unable to break free from the restraints of Yi Shiwen. "It's just a dragon's vein," Yi Shiwen sneered. He suddenly transformed into a monstrous big hand and rushed towards that fierce dragon to grab it. This fierce dragon was immediately caught by him and began to be refined in his hand. roars. This dragon spirit constantly roared, and struggled. Its painful howls shook the entire sea. The entire dragon's vein was shaking because of the dragon spirit's pain. This dragon spirit gradually became smaller under Yi Shiwen's giant hand. It was refined by Yi Shiwen. All the pores on Yi Shiwen's body opened up, and countless spiritual energy in the dragon's vein was absorbed by him. It almost formed a terrifying storm, with him as the center, and began to crazily pour into his body. Yi Shiwen's cultivation was rising at an astonishing speed. With the dragon spirit in Yi Shiwen's hand, it could not stop Yi Shiwen from absorbing the spiritual energy in the dragon's vein. If it was hiding in the depths of the dragon's vein, it would not be so easy for Yi Shiwen to find it. However, it rushed out immediately and was caught by Yi Shiwen. The dragon spirit was a spiritual object that was automatically born in the dragon's vein. It was also the essence of the entire dragon's vein. There were countless places in the world with abundant spiritual energy, but not every place could form a dragon's vein, not to mention on such a scale. A dragon's vein that could be built into a large sect could not be formed under normal circumstances. Only when the dragon spirit was born could it form a dragon's vein of such a scale. This was the same whether it was in the heavens or the fortune world. Once the dragon's spirit died, the entire dragon's vein would slowly wither. It could be said that it was born because of the dragon spirit, and it would also die because of the dragon spirit. One could imagine how important the dragon spirit was to the dragon's vein. Now that it was in Yi Shiwen's hand, it could not struggle at all. It could only watch Yi Shiwen crazily absorb the spiritual energy of the dragon's vein. Even the ferocious heaven-devouring ominous python would not absorb the spiritual energy in the dragon's vein so fiercely, because it had to pay attention to the long-term flow. However, Yi Shiwen did not care so much. To him, this was a one-time deal. If he wanted to break in again, it would not be so easy. Yi Shiwen sat in the depths of the dragon's vein, refining the dragon spirit while absorbing the spiritual energy in the dragon's vein. In his body, the mysterious space was operating crazily, absorbing the spiritual energy in the dragon's vein crazily while deducing the heavenly laws of the fourth and fifth realms. Yi Shiwen did not have that much wealth on him to carry out such large-scale deductions, but now he could do it. If an emperor saw Yi Shiwen like this, they would be scared immediately. Yi Shiwen was absorbing the spiritual energy in the dragon's vein, while his cultivation was increasing crazily. His cultivation had just reached the fourth realm, but now it was completely stabilized in a short period of time. Even if an ordinary person had such a dragon's vein, they could only absorb it slowly. Not all the spiritual energy absorbed could be transformed into cultivation power. The bottleneck of the realm stopped everyone's speed of absorbing spiritual energy. Everyone could only absorb the spirit energy in accordance with their current realm and skill. However, Yi Shiwen was different. He was absorbing the spirit energy while operating the mysterious space at the same time. Therefore, his realm and perception were also improving at an astonishing speed every moment. Therefore, he could continuously absorb the spiritual energy because his realm was also increasing, and his upper limit was increasing at every moment. He was like a chaotic beast that could never be satisfied. The more spiritual energy he absorbed, the more tyrannical he became. The more tyrannical he was, the more spiritual energy he absorbed. This was almost a process of complementing each other, allowing him to constantly improve at a stunning speed. As his skill became stronger and stronger, the spirit energy storm surrounding his body also became bigger and bigger. Many heaven-devouring ominous pythons noticed the changes on this side and quickly rushed over. However, they were all sucked into the storm almost in an instant. They were completely strangled into blood foam and were absorbed together with the storm. There was no difference at all. They couldn't even stop Yi Shiwen for a little bit. The entire dragon's vein was declining at a speed visible to the naked eye. The place around the dragon's vein, which was originally full of vitality, began to become desolate and miserable. These dragon's veins were violently turned into his own cultivation power by Yi Shiwen. Anyway, it was not his, so he did not feel bad at all. Yi Shiwen's cultivation was also constantly growing. Originally, his cultivation might have improved in 100 years, but now it was almost at a speed that he could perceive. Roar! Above Yi Shiwen. After the dragon's vain spirit roared for the last time, it finally stopped struggling. The entire dragon's vain spirit was refined by Yi Shiwen and turned into endless pure power that poured into Yi Shiwen's body. Boom! Every pore in Yi Shiwen's body opened, crazily absorbing. His cultivation power increased a lot, directly rushing towards the peak of the fourth realm. This was the dragon's vein spirit, the most essential part of the entire dragon's vein, equivalent to a small half of the dragon's vein. One must know that he had just cultivated to the fourth realm for a short period of time. Under normal circumstances, it would take at least tens of thousands of years, or at most hundreds of thousands of years, to be able to advance. However, he did not even use 100 years to touch the edge of the peak of the fourth realm. One could imagine how huge this dragon's vein was. It saved him countless years of time. Although there was a change in the matter of obtaining the non-phase spirit bone this time, it was a blessing in disguise. If not for this change, how could he have obtained the dragon's vein of the sky-devouring ominous python clan? Roar! At this moment, a terrifying aura swept out, and a huge figure, like a huge mountain, crushed down. The emperor-level sky-devouring ominous python appeared. The incident here had finally alarmed the emperor-level sky-devouring ominous python. He had just returned, and immediately saw the destruction of the dragon's vein. Suddenly, his whole body trembled, and a fierce aura rushed to the stars. The endless sea trembled because of his anger. At this moment, he was like a tyrant in the water, crushing everything. Roar! That sky-devouring ominous python, which was much bigger than the ordinary sky-devouring ominous python, suddenly opened its bloody mouth and bit towards Yi Shiwen, who was deep in the dragon's vein. At this critical moment, Yi Shiwen suddenly opened his eyes, and the aura on his body was released to the extreme. The peak of the fourth realm. Chapter 3049. After a crazy devouring, Yi Shiwen finally rushed to the peak of the fourth realm. This was the first time he had improved his martial power so violently after becoming an emperor. He had no scruples and was unscrupulous. The disadvantage of doing this was that he had destroyed the dragon vein in one go. The advantage was that he had rushed to the peak of the fourth realm in a short time. Moreover, there was no trace of reluctance. The mysterious space was crazily deducing many mysteries of the fourth realm and the heaven way for him, so he did not force himself at all. Even the speed of his comprehension was faster than the speed of his absorption of the spiritual energy. Even with the improvement of his realm and martial power, it was like a hot knife through butter. There was no obstacle at all, and he just crushed it. He finally advanced to the peak of the fourth realm. Although it was still the fourth realm, he could feel that the power in his body had improved by more than a little. That emperor-level sky-devouring ominous python opened its mouth wide and bit towards Yi Shiwen. This was a kind of magical ability, devouring the heavens and earth. This was also the origin of the name of the sky-devouring ominous python. This was an innate magical ability. An emperor-level sky-devouring ominous python could swallow a world in one bite without any pressure. An ordinary sky-devouring ominous python was already very terrifying, let alone an emperor-level sky-devouring ominous python. Yi Shiwen opened his eyes, and it seemed as if he had brought light to the entire world. Every pore on his body was spurting out sword ki, and it condensed into a huge sword above his head. This sword fiercely chopped down towards the ominous python. Boom! The sword light directly collided with the sky-devouring ominous python's attack. In an instant, it caused the endless void to collapse. Even this small world couldn't withstand such a level of battle. It showed signs of breaking apart, and there were actually cracks appearing. The sky-devouring ominous python was sent flying on the spot. A look of disbelief and astonishment flashed in its eyes. He had always been guarding the spirit vein, so his cultivation had improved very quickly. In just a few million years, he had already reached the fourth realm. He had originally seen the fierce battle outside and wanted to go and help, but who knew that someone would take advantage of the chaos to attack the spirit vein of the ominous Python clan. This was practically digging up the foundation of their clan, so he immediately rushed back. When he returned, he saw the devastation. The anger in his heart suddenly broke through the sky. But after a fight, he found that this person was not ordinary. An emperor-level creature that grew up in an extremely fierce environment like the Stormy Sea area could be said to have rich combat experience, and at the same time, an extremely tyrannical character. The Fourth Realm. Moreover, it was an experienced emperor-level creature of the Fourth Realm. In terms of fierceness, it was almost no less than the previous Yi Shiwen. If he had just been promoted to the Fourth Realm, it might have taken a lot of effort to deal with it. However, now he was already at the peak of the Fourth Realm. Compared to before, his strength was not as simple as just a little bit stronger. I must finish this quickly. I can't let you live. A cold light flashed in Yi Shiwen's eyes. In an instant, he moved. The demon wings behind him suddenly spread open, like clouds hanging in the sky. In a flash, he had already rushed in front of the fierce python. Roar! This fierce python was also extremely fierce. It looked up to the sky and roared. Countless surrounding laws were shaken out from its body, and the surrounding seawater instantly turned into poisonous water. This was a type of highly toxic law. In an instant, the law completely turned the surrounding seawater into poisonous water. Even if a sovereign emperor came into contact with it, it would be very troublesome, let alone a quasi-emperor. If they came into contact with it, they would be completely corroded in an instant. Countless poisonous water shot out like water arrows, like countless meteor showers, directly piercing through the space and shooting towards Yi Shiwen. This sky-devouring python cultivated a highly toxic ability, and it had clearly cultivated it to an extremely high level. It could control laws with its ability, and this was the fundamental reason why its true combat power was comparable to that of an imperial monarch. Otherwise, under normal circumstances, creatures that had not attained the Tao would not be able to fight back at all when facing an imperial monarch who had attained the Tao. However, these emperor-level creatures were obviously different. Do you think a mere highly toxic magical power can do anything to me? Yi Shiwen did not move. The Taiyu sword appeared in his hand, and for a few years, countless figures were scattered in the sky. Each figure was holding a Taiyu sword, and they slashed at the highly toxic water arrows. Bang! 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 In an instant, all kinds of highly toxic water arrows were smashed by the sword light on the spot, and once again turned into highly toxic seawater, merging into the surrounding sea. Many fierce pythons that had just approached were contaminated by this highly toxic seawater, and were corroded in an instant. In an environment like the sea, the power of this highly toxic magical power could be maximized. It was no wonder that the fierce python could eventually become an overlord. However, Yi Shiwen's counterattack had just begun. The countless figures that Yi Shiwen had transformed into instantly fused together into a single figure. Then, with an unparalleled momentum and terrifying power, it chopped down towards Yi Shiwen. In an instant, the world shook violently. After Yi Shiwen had been promoted to the peak of the Fourth Realm, this was the first time that he had completely released his power like this. In the face of this sword that seemed to be able to sever the heavens and earth, the sky-devouring, ominous python roared repeatedly and released its most powerful divine ability. Not only did it release the highly toxic divine ability, it also released the sky-devouring, ominous python's divine ability in an instant. All of a sudden, thousands of images appeared in the sky. In each image, the sky-devouring, ominous serpent was howling and roaring madly, unleashing a divine ability. There were also many other divine abilities hidden in its bloodline. At this moment, all of them were completely unleashed. Boom! However, this kind of grand scene of thousands of magical powers being released only lasted for a short period of time. As Yi Shiwen's sword light slashed down, these thousands of images that bloomed all collapsed in an instant. It was as if countless worlds had collapsed in front of it. Under Yi Shiwen's sword, all the worlds collapsed and could not be maintained. Yi Shiwen's sword light did not slow down and broke everything like a hot knife through butter. This fierce python could not stop it at all and burst out thousands of magical powers, but there was no change. Bang! The sword light fiercely slashed on the body of the fierce python. In an instant, it seemed as if two worlds had collided together, and the endless space was completely annihilated in this collision. Bang! A loud sound was heard, and the fierce python groaned. Its entire huge body was sent flying by Yi Shiwen's sword attack. A huge crack appeared on the forehead of the ominous sky-devouring python. A huge crack had appeared on its body, which was comparable to the toughest metal in the world. Blood flowed out continuously. The scene was quite horrifying. Roar! This fierce python continued to roar, and its roar shook the world. Yi Shiwen's attack failed to behead it. After all, it was also an extremely tyrannical expert of the fourth realm of Emperor level. If it was only a creature of the first realm, then it would have been severely injured by Yi Shiwen's sword attack and would no longer be a match for Yi Shiwen. Die! This ominous python opened its big mouth and let out a terrifying roar. A terrifying syllable came out of its huge mouth and suddenly rushed towards Yi Shiwen to kill him. Even the space couldn't accommodate its huge body, and it unexpectedly smashed the space, and just like that, it rushed towards Yi Shiwen. At this time, Yi Shiwen laughed out loud, and he was not angry. You came at the right time, and be my stepping stone. Just in time to test my current power. Yi Shiwen's whole body was shining, and an immortal light emerged from his golden body. His chi and blood were incomparably majestic, as if he was the most powerful Azura in the world. He took a step forward, and his aura rose at an astonishing speed. Behind him, there was a faint world manifesting, and it was unknown how many gods were sitting in this world, chanting ancient sutras. Yi Shiwen's black hair fluttered in the wind, and he was ostentatious and overbearing. This time, he did not even use the Taiyu sword, and only blasted a simple punch. Bang! This punch shook the entire universe, and it blasted towards the Emperor-level fierce python. Bang! This punch blasted out, and the world trembled violently. This punch directly blasted in front of the fierce python, and at this moment, the heaven and earth devouring magical power contained in the huge mouth of the fierce python was bombarded into pieces by Yi Shiwen's punch. Blood instantly burst out, and scales mixed with bone fragments flew everywhere. After being hit by Yi Shiwen's punch, the fierce python was immediately seriously injured, and its entire head directly exploded. In the next moment, the sky-devouring ominous python's head regrew. His expression was ferocious and cruel, and his blood was flowing in the surrounding seawater, which was full of poison, and his snow-white fangs looked incomparably awe-inspiring. Kill! In his huge mouth, a terrifying syllable burst out, and a terrible aura erupted from his body, and the terrible power of an Emperor-level creature completely spread out at this moment. At this moment, he no longer had any reservations. He had already seen that the figure in front of him was a peerless enemy, and if he did not kill him, then he would be in big trouble. At this moment, all the surrounding seawater was completely under his control, and it began to seal Yi Shiwen. It's no use for you to sublimate at this time. Yi Shiwen let out a loud roar. Then, he tore apart the magical power that the fierce python had used to imprison him on the spot. Chapter 3050. The sky-devouring, ominous python's magical power was torn apart by Yi Shiwen's hands. At this time, Yi Shiwen's aura was increasing every minute and second. As time passed, Yi Shiwen's mastery of his skyrocketing strength increased more and more, and his combat effectiveness also became stronger. The endless, surrounding seawater began to tremble violently under Yi Shiwen's boundless magic power, and then instantly evaporated. Roar! The sky-devouring, ominous python was already at this stage, so how could it admit defeat so easily? The scales all over its body stood up, and its mountain-like eyes suddenly opened. Circles of ripples spread out in all directions. This was a kind of magical power. It exploded in an instant, and the terrifying power absorbed from the void rushed towards Yi Shiwen. Kill! Yi Shiwen also let out a loud roar. However, he only let out a single roar. His aura became even more berserk. The martial emperor's seal above his head began to spin, sweeping out 3,000 martial arts. It was as if the world had been reshaped at this moment. The flow of all the laws was clearly visible. Boom! The martial emperor's seal directly fell, and it seemed as if the whole world was falling along with it. An unparalleled attack fell on the spot. Originally, Yi Shiwen wanted to keep some trump cards in the fortune realm, and he didn't intend to use some of his past techniques easily. He only planned to use the Taiyu sword to defeat most of his opponents. But now he couldn't care so much. If he wanted to get rid of this sky-devouring, ominous python in a short time, he must use all his combat effectiveness. A long delay could lead to unexpected changes. The sky-devouring, ominous python's various magical powers exploded in an instant and turned into the most terrifying golden fragments. They rolled back, and many of them directly hit the body of the ominous python. The martial emperor's seal was Yi Shiwen's strongest technique, and also his original martial arts. Once it was used, it was naturally invincible, and it broke the sky-devouring, ominous python's attack completely. The huge body of the ominous python was also constantly twisting, and the martial emperor's seal in the distance continued to fall, crushing the sky and suppressing all directions. A trace of shock flashed through the python's eyes. Although he was brutal, he was not without intelligence. He had never seen such a fierce and invincible opponent in the same realm. Even the tribes that had fought with the python for territory for many years had never seen such a fierce and invincible opponent. He had many tricks up his sleeves, and his physical body was extremely strong. He was actually able to severely injure him with a single punch. Yi Shiwen seemed to be the center of the world. He was the only celestial emperor in this world. Everything must be used by him. Die! The sky-devouring ominous serpent opened his mouth wide, and countless spirit chi surged into his mouth. His entire body had completely transformed into a Taoist form at this moment. However, it was an ugly man dressed in black scales. It was the Taoist form that he had transformed into. A pitch-black long whip appeared in his hand. He brandished it and slashed it towards Yi Shiwen's martial emperor seal. The long whip in his hand was not a Tao artifact, but in reality, its power was no less than that of a Tao artifact. This was because it did not contain the great Tao laws necessary for a Tao artifact. However, it was refined from the transformation of his tail. If they really fought, its power was no less than that of a Tao artifact. Boom! This long whip directly collided with the martial emperor's seal. Both sides were already emperor-level weapons, and they erupted with extreme power. The entire area of the dragon vein began to collapse. Inch by inch, the mountain collapsed in the seawater. Without the dragon vein spirit, the entire dragon vein had lost its vitality. There was no way to resist the sudden attack of such a level of power. Yi Shiwen held the martial emperor's seal in his hand and stretched out his body. His entire body was surging with a terrifying aura. The golden aura swept in all directions. His body was indomitable, like the legendary Pangu who split the heavens and the earth. He supported the heavens and the earth and wanted to create a mythical domain with his own strength. Countless martial Tao laws bloomed with a dazzling brilliance, and a powerful aura flowed around him. Die! The emperor-level sky-devouring, ominous python shouted. His black hair all stood up, and his eyes were wide open as if they were about to split open. He had already seen through Yi Shiwen's ferocity. Such a person must not be left alone. Not to mention that he had destroyed the dragon vein and destroyed the foundation of the sky-devouring, ominous python race. This was simply a heinous crime, and he must not be let off. However, after fighting for so long, he also knew that it was not possible to deal with this person in front of him by himself. The only way was to delay until the others came to support him, and then kill him. The more he thought about it, the more aggrieved he felt. They were the dignified overlords of the outer domain, and now they had suffered a great loss here. It was simply a great humiliation. Whoosh! The long whip in the hand of this sky-devouring, ominous python was like a mountain, and it slashed towards Yi Shiwen. His counterattack was fast and ruthless, and he used offense as defense. He must kill Yi Shiwen. However, completely different from him, Yi Shiwen did not have that much time to waste, let alone delay until the other Emperor-level experts came to support him. "Get lost!" Yi Shiwen shouted loudly. An astonishing killing intention was brewing in his eyes. His aura had become even more berserk. It seemed that it was impossible to repel this fierce python. He could see that this python was determined to delay him even if it had to die. That being the case, he had no choice but to kill it completely. The magic power in his body was raised to the extreme, and his vitality was stimulated to the highest point. His whole body was wrapped in golden vitality, and it seemed as if he was cast in gold. This golden vitality directly transformed into various Taoist characters and entangled his body like an ancient scripture. Martial Emperor Seal. The Martial Emperor Seal in Yi Shiwen's hand grew bigger and bigger, and completely integrated with his martial arts. Then, it directly smashed towards that long whip. Bang! A terrifying collision sound was heard, and the entire sea area turned into stormy waves. Normally, it was very difficult to set off such stormy waves in the deep sea area. After all, it was different from the surface of the sea. However, this collision had formed a terrifying collision, and it had swept in all directions. It had annihilated countless ominous pythons in an instant. An even more shocking scene took place. That incomparably hard long whip began to show dense cracks, and these cracks spread from the point of collision to the whole body. How is this possible? Even though the sky-devouring python was experienced and knowledgeable, it was still frightened at this moment. His long whip was comparable to a Dao tool. Even if an Emperor-level creature was caught off guard, it would still be severely injured in an instant. There was no other possibility. However, this person in front of him had actually shattered his weapon inch by inch with just one strike. Again, however, Yi Shiwen did not give it time to think. He roared on the spot and rushed forward again. The martial Emperor Seal grew bigger and bigger in Yi Shiwen's hand, and once again smashed down. Bang! 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 Yi Shiwen's offensive did not stop. The ominous python had no choice but to use the long whip in its hand to meet the enemy. It was constantly being smashed by the martial Emperor Seal. Boom! Suddenly, a huge explosion sound was heard. The long whip that was constantly being damaged exploded in an instant. Countless fragments of the long whip turned into black light and rolled back and directly pierced the strong body of the ominous python. Blood splashed out, and even some bones were directly smashed. This magic tool was comparable to a Taoist tool, but it was smashed by Yi Shiwen at this moment. The difference in quality between the two sides was too big. Stubborn. You had the opportunity to escape before. Do you still want to escape now? Yi Shiwen shouted loudly. He held the martial Emperor Seal in his hand, and his whole body broke free. His hair fluttered in the wind, and he turned into a green figure and attacked the ominous python. The ominous python looked up to the sky and roared again and again. Its whole body was bathed in black light, like a black iron god of war. Although it did not have a long whip, the fierce blood in its bones completely broke out at this moment. It did not have the slightest fear. On the contrary, it pounced towards Yi Shiwen and confronted Yi Shiwen head-on. For Yi Shiwen, this was also what he wanted. In terms of physical strength, he was not afraid at all in the same realm. 6 paths of reincarnation send you to hell. Behind Yi Shiwen, the 6 paths of reincarnation evolved, and it constantly rotated, spewing out the power of the 6 paths, suppressing everything in the world. All the creatures that belonged to the 6 paths of reincarnation would be affected by this set of fist techniques. Bang! The two sides directly collided, and the 2 fists collided. The ominous python's fists suddenly spattered with blood. Although it had the protection of the black scale clothes, and its physical body itself was tyrannical and unparalleled, it was obviously far from enough to be compared with Yi Shiwen. It could even be said that the difference was too big, and it was not Yi Shiwen's opponent at all. This blow had determined who was superior. The traces of the Great Way on the ominous python's fist and the magical power covering it were all obliterated under the bombardment of Yi Shiwen's golden vitality. Again, Yi Shiwen laughed heartily and continued to attack. Even the body of this ominous python, which was very proud of, couldn't withstand a single blow from Yi Shiwen's continuous attacks. The scales on its body had also completely shattered under the continuous attacks. It couldn't even withstand a single blow. The fragments flew in all directions, and it was unknown how many of its kind had been killed by Yi Shiwen. Boom! With another punch, Yi Shiwen and the ominous python's fist collided, and then only a loud bang was heard. The ominous python's arm was directly smashed in a blood fog by Yi Shiwen. There was a flash of panic in its expression, and it completely recognized the fierceness of the person in front of it. It retreated again and again, trying to open up a distance. If it continued like this, it would only be beaten to death. However, at this time it was simply too late. Yi Shiwen took a step forward and blasted in front of it, and a punch penetrated its chest. Blood burst and bone fragments swirled. Chapter 3051. The golden fist was like the sharpest weapon, and it instantly pierced through the chest of the Emperor-level, sky-devouring, ominous python. In an instant, this Emperor-level, sky-devouring, ominous python transformed into its original body. Its huge body immediately filled the space, and blood sprayed out like a mountain torrent, dyeing the surrounding seawater completely golden. This Emperor-level, sky-devouring, ominous python's body was still twitching slightly, but it was already dead. Its spirit had been completely shattered by Yi Shiwen's punch. It was completely killed by Yi Shiwen in one blow. And all of this took a long time to describe, but in fact only a short period of time had passed. A fourth realm, Emperor-level, sky-devouring, ominous python had died in Yi Shiwen's hands. It was not a match for him at all. After killing this Emperor-level, sky-devouring, ominous python, Yi Shiwen conveniently took the body of this Emperor-level, sky-devouring, ominous python into his bag. The body of an Emperor-level creature was simply priceless. It could be sold for a very high price, and even Emperor Lords would be tempted. Then, Yi Shiwen opened his hand and grabbed the rest of the dragon vein. Although the dragon vein was technically dead without the spirit of the dragon vein, so it was impossible to continue to nourish and strengthen the dragon vein, the remaining part of the dragon vein was still valuable. Yi Shiwen wanted to absorb the remaining parts of this dragon vein so that he could use it when he advanced to the fifth realm. Originally, he felt that all of this was still very far away. Even the peak of the fourth realm already required a very long time to reach the level. Even if he had the elixir that Dan Emperor mentioned, he should not be able to use it in a short period of time. However, now that he had devoured more than half of the dragon vein, his martial strength had risen to the peak of the fourth realm, which was many years ahead of his original plan. He had to prepare in advance, even if he had not originally prepared. With his dragon vein and the elixir, it was enough to send him to the fifth realm in one fell swoop. This dragon's vein was naturally extremely important to him. Rumble! A series of rumbling sounds exploded in the void. In the distance, various Emperor-level Emperor Lords were constantly fighting, and all kinds of laws and ripples were constantly rolling out. Intense battles were happening at every moment. Moreover, they were all in different directions because Elder Can and the others were breaking in from different directions. With their cultivation, unless they encountered an Emperor-level creature, it was impossible to stop them. Yi Shiwen even felt a terrifying aura raging. There were also peerless experts in the sky-devouring ominous python clan, so even Elder Can and the others were not willing to break in directly. Now, such a scene was just to provide cover. It was naturally for the best if someone could break in and seize the formless spirit bone. After Yi Shiwen broke in, he did not know how many sky-devouring, ominous python clan members he had encountered. Along the way, Yi Shiwen did not know how many sky-devouring, ominous python clan members he had. Yi Shiwen rushed all the way. He didn't know how many members of the heaven-devouring, ominous python clan had come across on the way. More and more heaven-devouring, ominous pythons had been awakened from their slumber as the battle had become more and more intense. These sky-devouring, ominous pythons that had not even reached the Emperor level couldn't stop Yi Shiwen at all. As long as they came into contact with Yi Shiwen's qi and blood, they would be burned into ashes. Yi Shiwen killed along the way, and it did not take long for him to reach the sky-devouring ominous python clan's graveyard. The laws here were completely different from those in other places. One sky-devouring ominous python after another was flying in the sky. Obviously, the fierce battle outside had alarmed them. Although these sky-devouring ominous pythons were dead, their obsessions did not dissipate. They turned into ghosts and scattered in the sky. Yi Shiwen had just rushed in when countless sky-devouring ominous python spirits rushed towards him. They were guarding the graveyard instinctively and attacked him. Clang! The Taiyu sword in Yi Shiwen's hand erupted with a burst of astonishing rays of light. The sword fell down, and those sky-devouring ominous python spirits were blown away in an instant. It was unknown how many of them had died. However, more sky-devouring ominous python spirits rushed over. It was unknown how many tyrannical experts of the sky-devouring ominous python clan had died over the past countless years. Their ghosts were lingering in this graveyard. Only in such an extreme environment could these ghosts survive and not dissipate completely. This was because the Een spirit itself was a special form of energy. Not every place could produce Een spirits. Even if it was a tyrannical creature, if it wasn't in an extremely suitable environment, even if it was born, it would quickly disperse. Yi Shiwen's complexion was indifferent while facing these ghosts. He simply snorted coldly. Then, every pore of his body spewed out blazing flames. The surroundings turned into a sea of fire in an instant. It seemed as if these ghosts had met their nemesis. They had been burned into ashes before they could even get close to Yi Shiwen. However, under the guidance of the last obsession of their lives, these ghosts still rushed over like moths flying into a flame. They couldn't stop Yi Shiwen's footsteps, but they still continued to rush towards him. Yi Shiwen didn't care about these ghosts. The Nan Ming mythical fire around his body transformed into a flame domain. These ghosts were completely isolated from him. They would be burned to death if they approached him. However, he continued to fly towards the depths of the graveyard. He could feel the intensity of the blood and qi left behind in these sky-devouring ominous python skeletons. He could easily determine whether these were the non-phase spirit bones left behind by the ominous python that he needed. The closer he got to the depths of the graveyard, the more powerful the skeletons of these ominous pythons became. Even Emperor-level existences were not uncommon. After sensing the invasion of Yi Shiwen's blood and qi, these sky-devouring ominous python skeletons began to move. It was as if the skeletons had been resurrected and rushed towards Yi Shiwen. However, these Emperor-level ominous python skeletons might have posed some threat to Yi Shiwen when they were alive. However, they had been dead for a long time now. So, Yi Shiwen chopped all of them with his sword and sent them flying away. He suddenly felt an extremely strong and terrifying aura rising in the middle of the graveyard of the ominous python skeletons. In the middle of the countless sky-devouring ominous python skeletons, a huge golden skeleton slowly began to exude a terrifying aura. "Who dares to disturb my eternal rest?" An indifferent and ice-cold voice came. A terrifying aura locked Yi Shiwen. He instantly felt as if he was being stared at by something extraordinary. Yi Shiwen's expression remained unchanged. He coldly said, "You're just playing tricks. You're just an obsession. I would have been afraid of you if you were still alive. But now, you're just an obsession. Do you think you can scare me away in front of me?" Yi Shiwen's eyes were like torches. He could clearly see through everything. He instantly realized that this was the doing of the huge, ominous python skeletons. The old ancestor of the ominous python skeletons was attached to the huge skeletons. It wasn't clear how much more tyrannical this old ancestor's soul was compared to the other ominous python skeletons. It had died countless years ago. However, its obsession hadn't dissipated. It had remained here all this time. It could be said to be very powerful. What a foreign invader! Suddenly, the ominous python skeletons roared. And, The huge golden skeletons began to shake slowly. The surrounding seawater also began to roll out in all directions along with the shaking of the golden skeletons. Roar! The golden skeletons burst into a loud roar. In an instant, it seemed as if a fierce, ominous python had been resurrected. Flesh and blood began to grow on its huge golden skeletons. In just a moment, it seemed as if it had returned to its previous state. However, it was different from the other ominous python skeletons. This ominous python's body wasn't black. On the contrary, it was golden in color. It seemed as if it was cast from gold. It was exuding a blazing brilliance. It seemed as if it was going to illuminate the entire sea area. A monstrous, ominous aura covered the sky. In an instant, it formed a great momentum. It evolved into an ominous python's body and pounced towards Yi Shiwen. Quick! 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 This golden ominous python suddenly pounced in front of Yi Shiwen. Its imposing aura soared to the sky. Clang! The Taiyu sword in Yi Shiwen's hand issued a clanging sound. Then it suddenly chopped down. Puchi! The sky-devouring, ominous python's shadow exploded on the spot, as if it was made of paper. It was directly cut apart. Yi Shiwen had just chopped the ominous python's phantom. He saw that the golden ominous python's ancestor had already opened its bloody mouth and pounced towards him. Suddenly, it opened its mouth and unleashed all kinds of magical powers. The magical power of swallow the heavens and devour the earth could even swallow the heaven and earth, let alone a person. If one were to be bitten, even an emperor lord would lose a layer of skin. This was the skeleton of the ominous python's ancestor. It was obviously just a skeleton. However, it could erupt with the combat power of an emperor lord. Moreover, it was just Ain's spirit. One could imagine how powerful it was when it was alive. Yi Shiwen understood that the non-phase spirit bone he was looking for was on the corpse of the ancestor of the heaven-devouring ominous python. No matter how he considered it, it was imperative to kill this ancestor of the heaven-devouring ominous python. The magical power of swallow the heavens and devour the earth was far inferior to the previous emperor-level ominous python's power. However, it was much more terrifying in terms of magical power. In an instant, the heaven and earth seemed to have turned into a bloody mouth. It swallowed Yi Shiwen and wanted to bite him to death. Yi Shiwen smiled coldly. Go to hell. Hand over the non-phase spirit bone. Chapter 3052. The Taiyu sword in Yi Shiwen's hand kept buzzing. A sword chi was instantly unsheathed, and the magical power of swallow the heavens and devour the earth was smashed on the spot. This magical power of swallow the heavens and devour the earth was nothing to Yi Shiwen. It could not pose any fundamental threat to him. If this golden, sky-devouring, ominous python was at the peak of its life, Yi Shiwen would have immediately turned around and left without any hesitation. After all, it was the ninth realm, or even the existence of the heavenly master level. However, even if it was ferocious now, it was just a nether spirit causing mischief. Roar! At this time, this terrifying golden sky, devouring ominous python's ancestor had instantly rushed up and rushed in front of Yi Shiwen. His bloody mouth was vast and mighty, but there was also a densine chi that had already been completely melted together. There was corpse chi rippling out, giving people a feeling of contradiction. Yi Shiwen's reaction was not slow. He blasted out a punch, which turned into 6 paths, forming the 6 paths of reincarnation fist. The punch penetrated the space and blasted into the golden sky, devouring ominous python's mouth, and instantly exploded. Rumble! This golden sky, devouring ominous python's ancestor, directly flew out upside down. Its huge body directly brought along monstrous waves. Its head was already dripping with blood, and its flesh had collapsed, revealing its golden bones. That was its foundation. Even such a powerful punch from Yi Shiwen had no way to break its golden bones. It could be imagined how powerful this golden sky, devouring ominous python's physical body was when it was alive. In the same realm, it was almost invincible. Even Yi Shiwen's gilded tyrant form couldn't break it. Roar! This golden sky, devouring ominous python quickly stabilized its body. At this moment, a huge mountain-like tail suddenly pierced out from the ground, like a world-destroying spear, and blasted towards Yi Shiwen. Clang! Yi Shiwen's reaction was not slow at all. Taiyu's sword instantly slashed down and cut the golden sky, devouring ominous python's tail. Clang! A loud voice, like a great bell, turned into waves of sound waves that spread in all directions. Taiyu's sword collided with the golden python's tail. For a moment, sparks flew everywhere. It was not an ordinary sparks, but a sea of fire that burned the endless deep sea. Even the space was burned. The tail of the golden sky-devouring ominous python was actually able to fight against a Dao weapon like the Taiyu sword without showing any signs of being at a disadvantage. The strength of its body was almost comparable to a Dao weapon. It was so strong that it was impressive. Roar! Yi Shiwen's sword swept away the spear-like tail. At the same time, the golden sky-devouring ominous python ancestor had already opened his bloody mouth. It tore through the layers of space and instantly bit towards Yi Shiwen. The world was sucked into his mouth in an instant. The entire space domain collapsed under his bite. Ka-ka-ka. The sound of space shattering was particularly clear in this deep sea. The space where Yi Shiwen was actually began to shatter inch by inch. This magical power was indeed not a trivial matter. Yi Shiwen did not have the slightest change in expression. His hair fluttered in the wind. He was arrogant and domineering. His expression was indifferent. He took a step forward, and a huge footprint was left in the void. His figure instantly rushed out like an arrow from a bow. 6 paths of reincarnation fist. Yi Shiwen blasted out another 6 paths of reincarnation fist. This fist was full of unparalleled strength. It suppressed everything in the world, and no one could resist it. That punch caused the world to tremble violently. The punch tore through the sky, bringing with it countless fist Dao laws, forming a terrifying wind. At this time, in the mouth of the golden sky, devouring ominous python, a man wearing a python robe appeared. This person's appearance could not be seen at all. One could only see his domineering figure. He was once invincible, and the ultimate old ancestor who created the supreme glory of the ominous python clan. Sky-devouring fist. This figure also blasted out a punch. It was also a supreme fist technique. In this punch, it seemed as if the surrounding space had completely collapsed. It directly collided with Yi Shiwen's 6 paths of reincarnation fist. The 6 paths of reincarnation fist instantly suppressed down. The sky-devouring fist that the figure blasted out turned into an ominous python, rushing straight to the sky and the earth. It was like an eternal dragon, and it fiercely blasted in Yi Shiwen's direction. Boom! The 6 paths of reincarnation will suppress the world above, and the ominous python was madly roaring and wreaking havoc. The scene seemed to be in a stalemate. However, this stalemate only lasted for an instant. The 6 paths roulette slowly rotated, and with every inch it rotated, the sky-devouring ominous serpent's body would shrink a little, and the space that he could struggle would shrink a little. The 6 paths of reincarnation fist continued to rotate. Finally, the ominous python's shadow exploded on the spot, and it turned into infinite energy that dispersed in all directions. Yi Shiwen's 6 paths of reincarnation fist did not reduce its momentum. It blasted into the chest of the man in the python robe. Boom! The man in the python robe let out a muffled groan. His entire body was blasted apart by Yi Shiwen's punch on the spot, and it turned into a terrifying explosion. The 6 paths of reincarnation wheel was still bombarding, and it directly blasted into the mouth of the ominous python. Boom! Another series of explosions came. The ominous python was once again smashed by Yi Shiwen, and its entire head flew out. However, because its body was too huge, its body was not sent flying by Yi Shiwen's punch. At this critical moment, the ominous python's tail was like a long spear, and it directly penetrated Yi Shiwen's chest. Boom! Yi Shiwen blasted out a punch, and contended with the tail. He was not to be outdone. His punch caused sparks to splatter, and the mountain-like tail was sent flying. Roar! After its head was smashed by Yi Shiwen's punch, the ominous python was not seriously injured. Instead, it became even more ferocious, and it was incomparably fierce. Yi Shiwen frowned slightly. This ominous python was more troublesome than he had imagined. Its body was simply immortal. Although only its bones were real, and the rest were illusions, it was still very troublesome even if it was only to this extent. Because he didn't have a real body, this was a weakness. But to some extent, it was also an advantage. No matter how many times he destroyed his body, it was useless. He could still recover very quickly. This was his home field. He could absorb too many evil spirits. Unless he could destroy his corpse, he wouldn't be able to do anything. If it was a protracted battle, it would definitely not be Yi Shiwen's opponent. However, Yi Shiwen did not have the time for a protracted battle. He could only end the battle quickly. Since it is a dead person, then it is a corpse calamity. Since it is a corpse calamity, then I will suppress it. Yi Shiwen looked coldly at the old ancestor of the ominous python in front of him. Conventional methods were definitely not a solution. The only way was to suppress the nether soul of the old ancestor of the ominous python. Without the nether soul causing trouble, there was nothing else to worry about. It was not a problem at all. A scripture appeared above Yi Shiwen's head, and it was releasing a kind of holy aura for a while. This was a scripture to suppress the corpse calamity. In the heavens, there were also extremely powerful corpse calamities. Yi Shiwen himself had suppressed them several times. There were large and small-scale ones. The large ones could even fight against the incomparably powerful emperor. Therefore, there were also martial arts techniques that were specially used to suppress these nether souls. They were specially used to deal with these nether souls. Originally, with Yi Shiwen's skill, there was no difference whether he used this specialized method or not. However, he was fighting for time now. Naturally, he did not care so much. For the nether souls, this martial arts technique was their nemesis. In this regard, these nether souls were very sensitive and perceived it almost immediately. Even if the nether soul was already at the emperor level and had essentially been separated from the ordinary nether souls, it would still be restrained. After all, he was not like the ominous ghost emperor who became a ghost emperor. At that point, he could be considered to be able to get rid of the influence of the scripture. A bit of fear flashed in his eyes. This was a kind of intrinsic restraint that had nothing to do with cultivation. It was already inevitable when his obsession incarnated into a nether soul. The scripture above Yi Shiwen's head turned into a magical power and instantly suppressed the old ancestor of the ominous python. Roar! The old ancestor of the ominous python instantly roared after his death. His eyes were like cold lightning. His huge body was like a huge mountain rolling back. This old ancestor of the ominous python immediately counterattacked. If he continued to be suppressed by Yi Shiwen's scripture to suppress the corpse calamity, perhaps even if he was once invincible in the world, he would not be able to withstand such suppression. An extremely fierce look flashed in his eyes. He turned into a middle-aged man wearing an official robe. He held a long spear in his hand and blasted towards Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen smiled coldly and slashed down with his sword. Bang! The long sword and the long spear fiercely collided, setting off boundless stormy waves. Suppress for me! Yi Shiwen let out a long and loud shout. The innumerable scriptures that were used to suppress the calamity rotated rapidly above his head. They eventually fused together and turned into a suppressed character. Then, it bypassed the long spear and pressed down towards the head of the golden python ancestor. Ah! This old ancestor of the ominous python began to scream crazily and mournfully. His nether soul hidden in the endless corpses was affected and began to roll in the sea. Now! Yi Shiwen directly grabbed a big hand and grabbed the old ancestor of the ominous python. Roar! On the body of the old ancestor of the ominous python, there seemed to be something being pulled out by Yi Shiwen, inch by inch. Chapter 3053. Roar! The roar of the old ancestor of the golden sky, devouring python, was earth-shattering. He was struggling, constantly struggling, but the word suppress on top of his head was constantly suppressing. The old ancestor of the golden sky, devouring python, only felt that his power was gradually being sealed. Slowly, his power seemed to be drawn out of his body. Even though he was experienced and knowledgeable, he didn't know how many magical powers and martial arts he had mastered. An ordinary emperor was really not his opponent. However, he also had a fatal flaw. In the face of the ancient scripture that was specially created to suppress this kind of corpse disaster, it went straight to his weakness. Therefore, he had no way to resist at all. He could only struggle constantly. Under the suppression of the scripture that Yi Shiwen had suppressed, the golden sky devouring python could only think of ways to prevent himself from being drawn out of the corpse by this force. Once he was drawn out, the consequences were simply unimaginable. Even though he was just a specter transformed from an obsession, he was also very clear in this aspect. Yi Shiwen's hands were constantly changing the seals. The word suppress was constantly bursting with dazzling golden light. It seemed to completely suppress all evil, leaving no way for this specter to survive. Roar! The old ancestor of the golden sky devouring pythons saw that he couldn't suppress his specter and was about to be extracted out. He immediately roared and attacked Yi Shiwen. The long spear directly pierced out as if it wanted to tear the world apart. It wanted to blast Yi Shiwen into pieces. Bang! A loud rumbling sound was heard, and the spear stopped 3 inches in front of Yi Shiwen. The time robe appeared on Yi Shiwen's body. Although there was a huge wound on his chest due to the severe injuries caused by the spear, most of his abilities were still there. The long spear pierced in front of Yi Shiwen. It seemed as if it had broken through the endless energy in a split second and set off a terrifying energy frenzy. The collision point between the two sides was the center, and the energy surged in all directions. Yi Shiwen's expression didn't change. Even if the long spear had pierced 3 inches in front of his face, his expression was still the same. His hands didn't stop at all. He was constantly changing the seals. Every minute and every second, he was suppressing the specter of the golden sky devouring python. This golden python was even more ferocious. Its long spear unceasingly bombarded towards Yi Shiwen like raindrops. It could pierce through the time domain around Yi Shiwen every time, but it couldn't really break the time robe. After all, there was still a huge gap between it and the terrifying attack of Emperor Primordius. Whoosh! The martial emperor seal on Yi Shiwen's body suddenly flew out. It grew bigger and bigger like a mountain. 3,000 martial principles were released all at once. They pressed downwards and increased the power of the suppressed character. Roar! Under the suppression of the martial emperor's seal, the old ancestor of the golden sky, devouring ominous python, suddenly felt a sharp increase in pressure. He kept roaring, but it was useless. He couldn't break free. He could feel that his strength was getting weaker and weaker. The long spear in his hand was also constantly bombarding Yi Shiwen. However, he couldn't deal with Yi Shiwen in the end. They're out. Yi Shiwen fiercely opened his eyes all of a sudden. The ancestor of the golden heaven, devouring ominous python, instantly transformed into its incomparably huge body. It was constantly struggling, and its huge body stirred up monstrous waves in the sea. On his body, a specter was slowly peeling off bit by bit. Although the speed wasn't fast, there were still endless talismans on this corpse suppressing the specter. They were trying to seal the specter into the bones again. However, Yi Shiwen still managed to pull the specter out with this scripture. Even if it was only a little bit, it was already the beginning. Things would become easier later. However, Yi Shiwen's face revealed a somewhat anxious look. He could already feel that a terrifying aura was already rushing over here. That majestic and tyrannical aura was so boundless that even Yi Shiwen could feel it from far away. It must be a supreme expert of the heaven-devouring ominous python clan. He must finish everything before that terrifying existence returns. He didn't want to stay and be surrounded. Roar! 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 The old ancestor of the golden sky, devouring ominous python, continued to struggle and roar. However, it was of no use. The more he struggled and roared, the more he was pulled out. As more and more parts were pulled out, his strength was affected more and more, and he could only struggle less and less. If it weren't for the fierce nature of his heart, perhaps he would have completely collapsed. "Come out!" Yi Shiwen formed a big hand and directly grabbed above the old ancestor of the golden sky, devouring ominous python. He grabbed the specter and pulled it out from the body of the golden sky, devouring ominous python little by little. In fact, he had completely and utterly extracted the Ean's spirit from his body. This specter directly transformed into an ominous python. It was thousands of miles long. It was extremely huge. There was a terrifying killing intent in its eyes. In fact, there was only such tyrannical killing intent in its eyes. There was nothing else. This specter was formed from only one obsession. Therefore, compared to other creatures, this specter's thoughts were very simple and pure. It only had tyrannical and devouring thoughts. Almost at the moment when it was pulled out, the last trace of clarity and reason disappeared without the suppression of the power of the corpse. Only these tyrannical thoughts were left. This specter had completely turned into an ominous spirit. It rushed towards Yi Shiwen and wanted to bite him to death. However, Yi Shiwen wasn't afraid at all. If it was in his body, Yi Shiwen might be a little afraid. However, it was just an ominous spirit. No matter how terrifying it was when it was alive, it was nothing for Yi Shiwen, who was already in the Emperor realm. Suppress. The word suppress continued to burst into bright light. This time, it didn't suppress the old ancestor of the golden sky, devouring ominous python. Instead, it suppressed his ominous spirit. Roar! With continuous roars, the huge body of this ominous spirit burned into ashes in the void bit by bit under the suppression of the word suppress. It was completely annihilated. For creatures that didn't have eternal life, even if they were powerful enough to reach the Emperor level, they would still die. Even if they became spirits, they had to be nurtured in a special way in order to be preserved for a long time. Otherwise, even the spirits of Emperor-level creatures wouldn't be of much use. They would automatically turn into ashes with the passage of time. Yi Shiwen breathed a sigh of relief. He finally succeeded. In front of him, the body of the old ancestor of the golden sky, devouring ominous python, began to gradually melt in the seawater. Gradually, only the huge body that Yi Shiwen saw in the beginning was left. Success! Yi Shiwen formed a big chi-condensed hand and directly grabbed the corpse. Since the ominous spirit born on the corpse had been eliminated, it naturally wouldn't resist. However, at this moment, an amazing sword light broke through the sky and instantly broke Yi Shiwen's big chi-condensed hand. Boom! The sword light submerged into the bottom of the sea and set off shocking waves. The mud mixed into the seawater and muddied this part of the sea area. Who is it? Yi Shiwen suddenly opened his eyes, and a wisp of light burst out from his eyes. You'd better not have any thoughts about the phaseless spirit bone. A frivolous and indifferent voice sounded behind Yi Shiwen. A figure finally emerged. I didn't expect you to be one step ahead of me. The figure finally appeared in front of Yi Shiwen. It was a man wearing an emperor robe. He had 12 pairs of wings behind him. Even the exposed parts of his face and hands were covered with feathers. There was a somewhat frivolous smile on his face. It seemed that he was certain that he could defeat Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen's eyes were firmly locked on this man. He slowly said, "If I'm not mistaken, you are the Feather Emperor? Martial Emperor, I didn't expect you to be able to trample on my origin. You are really not simple," the man said indifferently. "There are rumors that you were seriously injured. Now it seems that they must have been deceived by you." Yi Shiwen slowly opened his mouth and said, countless information streaked across his mind like a lightning. Countless thoughts flashed through his mind. He had never thought that the Feather Emperor would be able to reappear. Previously, the Pill Emperor and the others had also said that the Feather Emperor would definitely not be able to participate in this expedition due to his serious injuries. Yi Shiwen firmly believed this. After all, with the cultivation and experience of the Pill Emperor and the others. Pretending to be injured wouldn't be able to deceive them. It was as if someone had pretended to be injured in front of him in an attempt to deceive him. It was simply impossible to do so. The eyes of the Emperor Lords could see through falsehoods and see through the essence. It was almost impossible to deceive them. Therefore, he didn't think too much about it in the beginning. Now that he thought about it, he was afraid that he had indeed missed out a lot. Although he didn't know what method he used to deceive all the emperors, it was obvious that his purpose of appearing here was also very obvious. It was for the phaseless spiritual bone. It's not easy to deceive that old fellow, Elder Shun, the Feather Emperor said faintly. There was a somewhat complacent smile on his face. It was obvious that he was quite proud of himself. In that case, the person who alarmed the sky-devouring, ominous Python clan must have been you. Yishuan glanced at him indifferently and said, "That's right, it was me." Otherwise, the sky-devouring, ominous Python clan might have been discovered only after you had reached the tomb, if you had been a little more careful. The Feather Emperor said with a smile. However, it's all thanks to me. Otherwise, do you think that there would be no one guarding such an important tomb? And you had the opportunity to obtain the phaseless spirit bone so easily. Now that the big guy is about to return, how about we make a deal? We will each take half of the phaseless spirit bone. What do you think? Chapter 3054. How about it? Let's make a deal. We'll split the phaseless spiritual bone in half. How about it? Yu Emperor said confidently, as if he was very sure that Yi Shiwen would agree. His expression was very calm, because he also sensed that a big guy was coming in this direction. When that big guy arrived, neither of them would be able to get what they wanted. Originally, this was not in his plan. He did not intend to cooperate with Dendi and the others from the beginning. He just wanted to use Dendi and the others to get the phaseless spiritual bone, which was the most difficult to get. By then, he would be able to use the phaseless spiritual bone to refine a few pellets. Wouldn't that be great? Although for pellets, the more they were consumed, the weaker the effect would be. The body would also develop resistance, but it was still much faster than normal cultivation. However, who knew that in his plan, Yi Shiwen would appear? In the end, Yi Shiwen was one step ahead of him. He could only settle for the next best thing and share it with Yi Shiwen. Even if it was an equal share, it was still much better than only getting one. The most difficult part of the whole pellet refining was to get the phaseless spiritual bone. Otherwise, they would not have prepared for tens of thousands of years before starting. If he hadn't sensed the arrival of that big guy, he wouldn't have given up so easily. He would have snatched the non-phase spirit bone from Yi Shiwen's hands. Otherwise, he wouldn't have cared so much since he had already reached this stage. However, in his opinion, this was a charity for Yi Shiwen. He put his hands behind his back and was in high spirits. In his eyes, there was unimaginable transcendental confidence. Cooperate? Why should I cooperate with you? Yi Shiwen looked at Yu Emperor and smiled coldly. What? Yu Emperor did not seem to think that Yi Shiwen might refuse. He had thought of all the possibilities, but he did not think that Yi Shiwen would refuse. The situation in front of him was obviously a situation where both sides would benefit if they cooperated. As long as it was a normal person, they would choose to cooperate. It seems that you really want to do this the hard way. Yu Emperor's expression turned cold. His eyes flashed with a horrifying, killing intent. Do you want to do this the hard way? You? Yi Shiwen grinned and said. Their auras erupted silently, and the terrifying aura of an imperial lord swept through the entire graveyard, startling many of the Een spirits in the graveyard. Many of the Een spirits were only at the Divine King realm, so they were directly turned into ashes by the Emperor realm aura. Even the Een spirits that were formed after the death of a quasi-emperor, sky-devouring Python, could only tremble in fear when the two auras collided. They could not fight back at all. Only the Emperor sky-devouring Python, Een spirits, could barely resist it. However, they could only resist. They didn't dare to get close at all. Just the aura alone was enough to make them feel like they couldn't resist. After all, they were no longer at the peak. Not all Emperor-level sky-devouring Pythons were like the golden sky-devouring Python old ancestor. Even if they only had Een spirits left, they could still control corpses to fight against imperial emperors. That kind of person was already an omnipotent existence. If it wasn't for the limited lifespan of emperor-level creatures, they would definitely be a supreme giant in the outer domain if they could cultivate endlessly. However, if it wasn't for their own bloodline, it wouldn't be easy for ordinary creatures to cultivate to that level. It was almost impossible. "You Emperor, it's you." A surprised voice came from afar. Then, Dinda flew over from afar, looking extremely embarrassed. Dinda looked very embarrassed. Obviously, he had just experienced a fierce battle, and he had barely rushed here. However, before he could take a breath, he saw two familiar figures. One of them was naturally Yi Shiwen. There was nothing strange about it. However, he had never imagined that he would see the Feather Emperor here. Every single one of those that were able to cultivate to the Imperial Monarch realm was a wise man amongst wise men, and they practically instantly understood the principle of seeing through the affairs of the world. All of this was probably due to the Feather Emperor adding fuel to the fire from behind. Earlier, they were discovered as soon as they entered, and the Feather Emperor was probably playing tricks in the shadows as well. He had known you Emperor for tens of thousands of years. He had experienced many things from the beginning to the end, so he naturally understood very well. "It's really unexpected. We all thought that you were seriously injured, but you were actually able to deceive our eyes. You must have paid a great price." Dinda's face revealed a somewhat mocking smile. "In order to achieve today's goal, you can be considered to have put in a lot of effort. Dinda, you don't have to say this nonsense. If you continue to delay, when the other sky-devouring, ominous pythons come over, even you and I will be very difficult to escape." You Emperor's face didn't show the slightest bit of emotion, nor did he feel the slightest bit of guilt. Dinda naturally understood this principle. As the entire sky-devouring, ominous pythons were alarmed, every step forward was very difficult. He had just experienced a fierce battle, and if it wasn't for the timely arrival of Elder Can in the end, he might not have been able to escape. Even the Emperor realm was in such a state. One could imagine how bad the current situation was. If they continued to delay, they might really not be able to escape, as you Emperor had said. He even sensed that a super terrifying existence was rushing over. "You also know my strength. Even if the two of you join forces, you won't be a match for me. Now I will give you a chance. Let's split the phaseless spirit bone in half. Each of us will take half. This way, we won't hurt each other's relationship. What do you think?" You Emperor said patiently. He wouldn't have cared if it was just Yi Shiwen alone. Yi Shiwen had suppressed the old ancestor of the golden sky-devouring ominous python with lightning speed. But that was only because Yi Shiwen had used a special power technique. In his eyes, all of that was not worth mentioning. However, it would be completely different if Dinda was included. Even if Dinda wasn't good at fighting, it would still be a huge pressure to have such a great master of the Third Realm watching from the side. Dinda looked quite tempted. They had come this time for the phaseless spirit bone. They were very unhappy that they would have to split it with this traitor in the end. However, they would lose everything if they didn't agree with you Emperor's proposal. None of them would be able to get it. Both sides would benefit if they worked together, and both sides would lose if they were divided. He was very clear on this point. Even if there were two people on his side, there was no need to completely fall out. Not to mention, in his heart, even though Yi Shiwen was a junior from the same hometown, he wasn't as terrifying as you Emperor. He had worked with you Emperor for many years. Therefore, he was more aware of you Emperor's amazing strength. Among the Fourth Realm, you Emperor's strength was also one of the top. "Martial Emperor, what do you think?" Dinda looked at Yi Shiwen. At this moment, he naturally couldn't have any disagreement with Yi Shiwen. "Work together? Why should we work with him? You think too highly of yourself if you want to take advantage of this situation." Yi Shiwen's expression was indifferent. His attitude was exactly the same as before. He had no intention of changing at all. "So, Martial Emperor, you don't agree?" Feather Emperor's expression became increasingly indifferent. He hadn't expected that Yi Shiwen would still dare to be so arrogant at this point. In fact, Yi Shiwen didn't even agree to his proposal to divide the spoils equally. This was an extremely arrogant and despotic suggestion. That's right, I don't agree. Who do you think you are? How dare you snatch my things? Yi Shiwen had fought hard until now. He had killed 2 Emperor-level existences in order to get his hands on the phaseless spirit bone. Yu Emperor didn't do anything. Yet he actually wanted to share the spoils. He was simply thinking too much. Good. I haven't seen anyone who dared to be arrogant with me for many years. Yu Emperor was so angry that he laughed. It seems that if I don't teach you a lesson, you won't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Although an Emperor Lord's age couldn't be directly determined, it could be roughly determined by how long the Emperor Lord had been cultivating. Yu Emperor looked at Yi Shiwen's soaring spirit and knew that Yi Shiwen hadn't cultivated for a long time. He was just a junior. Although age didn't mean anything in the Emperor Lord realm, the older ones were often more powerful than the younger ones. Teach me a lesson? If you can do it, then go ahead and try. Cut the crap. I don't have time to talk nonsense with you. Let's fight. Yi Shiwen didn't have any intention to talk nonsense with him. That terrifying aura was gradually approaching. Dan Emperor could only stand in the same trench as Yi Shiwen. No matter what, he couldn't stand on Yu Emperor's side. Although it seemed to him that this was an extremely unwise decision, he couldn't not support it. Madman, this was a madman. The killing intent in Yu Emperor's eyes became even more intense. In his eyes, Yi Shiwen had already become a madman. He would rather fight with him to the point where neither of them could obtain the phaseless spirit bone. But he wasn't willing to give in. This was also a common problem between young Emperor Lords. Young Emperor Lords were naturally young and vigorous. They had been invincible geniuses all along the way. They didn't know what compromise was. You really won't shed a tear until you see the coffin. It seems that if you don't use some real skills, you won't know why the flowers are so red. A cold killing intent appeared on Yu Emperor's face. You rejected my good intentions. I'll let you know what kind of price you have to pay. The killing intent on his body was awe-inspiring, and it directly materialized. He was completely infuriated by Yi Shiwen. His many years of planning might go up in smoke because of Yi Shiwen's stubbornness. How could he not be incomparably angry? Yu Emperor's body moved, and he suddenly flew out. The wings on his back opened, and he flew out like a ferocious bird pouncing on its prey. In an instant, everything in the world seemed to have disappeared. Only Yu Emperor's terrifying figure was left in the world. He threw a punch towards Yi Shiwen. Chapter 3055. Yi Shiwen saw Denda's expression and naturally knew what he was thinking. He immediately said, "Dendi, don't worry. I'm not young and rash, nor am I acting out of spite. It's just a feather emperor. You don't have to worry at all. Watch how I take down the feather emperor." After Yi Shiwen finished speaking, he soared into the sky like a golden-winged rock and clashed with the feather emperor. Just a feather emperor? Dendi was a little dumbfounded because he didn't expect Yi Shiwen's evaluation of the feather emperor to be so low. He didn't know where Yi Shiwen got his confidence from, but he didn't have a choice at this moment. He raised his strength to the extreme and watched as the two sides collided. Boom! In an instant, the two sides were like two peerless, ferocious birds that collided fiercely. It even set off a terrifying wave. In an instant, a shocking collision spread out in all directions. Yi Shiwen's clothes fluttered in the wind, but he didn't move at all. In the next moment, he attacked again. The entire 6 paths of reincarnation appeared behind him. Every time the 6 paths of reincarnation rotated, the power of reincarnation would gush out. It could be said to be earth-shattering. It contained the mysteries of the universe and the mysteries of heaven and earth. He had truly practiced the 6 paths of reincarnation fist to the extreme and opened up a unique path that belonged to him. He wasn't inferior to the Azura Demon King back then. This is the 6 paths of reincarnation fist. Denda's eyes widened. In the fortune realm, perhaps not many people could understand this fist technique. However, to him, this fist technique wasn't unfamiliar. When he became an emperor, the 6 paths of reincarnation fist had already been passed down in the world. It was extremely powerful. However, he had never seen anyone who could practice this fist technique to this level. Moreover, it was obvious that this person had cultivated his own path and opened up a world of his own. Go to reincarnation. Yi Shiwen's fist blasted towards the Feather Emperor. Countless spirits of the ominous python seemed to have sensed something as they flew into the celestial Tao. They were killed, and the might of Yi Shiwen's fist increased by a lot. Yi Shiwen's fist had become much more powerful. What martial art is this? The Feather Emperor had lived for so many years, but he had never seen such a fist technique before. It contained the principles of the universe and involved the cycle of reincarnation. This was even higher than comprehending a single type of martial arts. However, there was no time for him to hesitate. Yi Shiwen's 6 paths of reincarnation fist set off an earth-shattering aura chi frenzy, which immediately caused a strong resonance between the heaven and the earth. The 6 paths of reincarnation suppressed all directions. Kill! Feather Emperor shouted and punched. An extremely pure fist energy gushed out of his body in an instant. It instantly turned into a monstrous, ferocious bird that pounced towards Yi Shiwen. Divine bird heaven-shattering fist. The Feather Sovereign let out a roar, and the divine bird soared into the sky, clashing with the 6 paths roulette. Bang! 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 The divine bird soared high into the sky and clashed with the 6 paths of reincarnation fist. Earth-shattering energy waves were released every time they collided. The Feather Sovereign was indeed worthy of being the main force that Elder Kan and the others had placed their hopes on. His martial arts were tyrannical to the extreme, even more so than Elder Kan, who had cultivated for countless years. His combat prowess even far surpassed that of the Emperor-level sky-devouring python that Yi Shiwen had slain in the dragon vein. The divine bird grew larger and larger. Every time it flapped its wings, the heaven and earth would violently turn upside down. It was actually trying to break free from the cycle of reincarnation and escape the control of the 6 paths of reincarnation. The two's fist energy turned into endless energy in the deep sea as they collided. How could Yi Shiwen allow the Feather Sovereign to break through his 6 paths of reincarnation fist? His expression was solemn as he punched out again. The space in his left hand stabilized the heaven and earth, while the time in his right formed the river of time. Time and space were the foundation of the universe. Yi Shiwen hadn't reached that stage yet. That was the peak of his 6 paths of reincarnation fist, which he had planned out himself. This was the true peak that even the creator of the 6 paths of reincarnation fist, the Azura Demon King, had never imagined. The 6 paths of reincarnation fist's 6 paths of reincarnation fist creator, the Azura Demon King, relied on the heaven and earth of the heavens and earth. It used the heaven and earth of the heavens and earth as the foundation to carry out the 6 paths of reincarnation. However, this required an extremely deep understanding of the heaven and earth. Thus, the power of the 6 paths of reincarnation fist was a little lacking in the Fortune realm. Yi Shiwen had been improving his cultivation over the past few years, but he had also been researching how to improve the power of these lost techniques. Especially when he knew that there might be a heavenly venerable level expert, he felt even more strongly that he had to prepare for many things in advance. The 6 paths of reincarnation fist borrowed the power of heaven and earth. If he couldn't borrow it, he might as well create a world of his own, using time and space to create a chaotic world. In this world, the 6 paths of reincarnation was the supreme law. As such, the power of the 6 paths of reincarnation fist would increase exponentially. However, he hadn't completely integrated the power of time and space into one. Otherwise, he would truly be able to rebuild the universe. At that time, the power of the 6 paths of reincarnation fist would truly rise to a whole new level. Even so, the power of the 6 paths of reincarnation fist had directly risen to a whole new level after adding the power of time and space. Feather Emperor instantly felt the pressure on him increase exponentially. A look of disbelief flashed across his face. This unknown fist technique utilized the power of reincarnation. It was originally an inexplicably profound fist technique. Now that its power had increased exponentially, the pressure on him had doubled. Bang! 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 The two of them collided wildly in the deep sea. Feather Emperor retreated again and again under Yi Shiwen's powerful offensive. It was unknown how much seawater in the deep sea had been turned into ashes by the collision. Even the basic atoms had evaporated on the spot. However, the sea was endless. No matter how much was destroyed, it could be immediately replenished. However, it was also because of this that the endless seawater isolated the final damage between the two of them. If they were fighting on the sea, the battle between the two of them would be enough to explode the galaxy in the sky. Yi Shiwen didn't show any mercy. He forced his way forward step by step. His clothes were fluttering under the violent waves of energy. So strong. Dinda finally understood why Yi Shiwen was so confident earlier. Feather Emperor was almost the strongest among the Fourth Realm experts. However, Yi Shiwen was even stronger than him. He was almost the strongest Fourth Realm expert he had ever seen. He started to feel lucky that his side could invite such an expert. Moreover, such an expert wasn't as despicable as Feather Emperor. However, Dinda's expression gradually became anxious. That terrifying existence was getting closer and closer. It would arrive soon. Taoist Wu Di, hurry up. Yi Shiwen heard Dinda's words and naturally understood what he was worried about. He said, Taoist Wu Di, don't worry. Watch me destroy him. You're too much. Feather Emperor saw that Yi Shiwen didn't put him in his eyes at all. Yi Shiwen completely ignored him like he was an ant. The anger in Feather Emperor's heart was about to burn everything down. Bang! A loud rumbling sound was heard as Yi Shiwen's fist blasted into the Feather Emperor's body. The Feather Emperor's body was instantly blown away. However, no flesh and blood could be seen flying out. Instead, countless feathers were seen fluttering in the sky. Did I let him escape? Yi Shiwen squinted his eyes. His attack missed. His opponent had used an extremely powerful movement technique to instantly replace his real body. He clearly felt that his attack had almost hit his real body. Not far away, Feather Emperor's figure slowly appeared. He looked at Yi Shiwen with eyes full of hatred. Just now, he was almost seriously injured by Yi Shiwen's punch. It also made him understand how terrifying this person in front of him was. I'm not leaving. I'll drag it out until that big guy comes back. I'd like to see how you're going to get the phaseless spirit bone. Since I can't get it, then no one else can. Feather Emperor's face showed a cold expression. He had been completely infuriated by Yi Shiwen. Even if he had to use this method of mutual destruction, he didn't care. He was very clear that with Yi Shiwen here today, he could forget about getting the phaseless spirit bone. Since he couldn't get it, then no one else could get it. Otherwise, how could he vent his anger today? You want to wait until that big guy comes back? I don't think you have that chance. Yi Shiwen said coldly. All of this took a long time to describe, but in fact, it was only a moment. There was still time, although there wasn't much time left. Ha ha, I, Feather Emperor, have been unstoppable all my life. I didn't expect to suffer a big setback here. Feather Emperor laughed loudly. Yi Shiwen's disdainful voice came into his ears. Not only will you suffer a setback today, but you will also leave your life here. Yi Shiwen's voice hadn't even faded when his whole body had already pounced on him. The 6 paths of reincarnation fists split the world and suppressed reincarnation. The fist energy was also unparalleled. The Feather Emperor's entire body was trembling violently as countless streams of energy gushed out. In an instant, a feather robe covered his entire body, covering all his weaknesses. Under the cover of this feather robe, he directly blasted out a punch and collided with Yi Shiwen's 6 paths of reincarnation fist on the spot. Boom! It was another terrifying collision. With their fists as the center, the sky shook violently and rolled out in all directions. The clothes on their bodies were fluttering. Yi Shiwen's body didn't move an inch. He was like a glaring Vajra between heaven and earth, suppressing all the turmoil. On the other side, Feather Emperor actually didn't fly out. He just swayed slightly and calmed down. All the power was absorbed by his feather robe. Ha ha ha, Martial Emperor, I want to see how you plan to kill me. Chapter 3056. Ha ha, Martial Emperor, I'd like to see how you plan to kill me. Feather Emperor didn't expect to get the phaseless spiritual bone. However, if he couldn't get it, no one else could. No matter what kind of means you have, you will die today. If you want to blame someone, blame yourself for scheming against me. Yi Shiwen said in an ice-cold voice. Die! Yi Shiwen took a step forward and suddenly blasted his fist down. His aura violently vibrated, and the world around him suddenly caused a strong resonance. The momentum of the world began to distort and formed a circular storm with Yi Shiwen as the center. The storm began to rotate violently, and a violent attack instantly blasted out, revealing a terrifying cultivation. Dan Emperor looked at this scene and couldn't help but be frightened. Although he only had the cultivation of the third realm and wasn't good at fighting, he was only good at it compared to the other emperors who had become emperors through martial arts. In terms of combat power, he wasn't too far behind. However, when he saw Yi Shiwen's full strength erupt, even he couldn't help but be frightened. He vaguely remembered the first time he saw Yi Shiwen. Although he had already faintly felt that Yi Shiwen's cultivation might be above his, it had definitely not reached such a level. It was as if the world had been turned upside down. Could it be that he had encountered some kind of miracle in this short period of time? How could he be so powerful? For a moment, many thoughts flashed through Dandy's mind. Many ideas. Feather Emperor roared, and a sharp look flashed in his eyes. An extremely condensed spiritual power surged out of his body. In an instant, it turned into thousands of figures. These thousands of figures were actually ferocious birds. Each of them could easily destroy a world and tear apart a galaxy. And he stood in the center of these thousands of figures. The Feather Emperor cultivated in this aspect of martial arts. He controlled all the ferocious birds in the world and used this to achieve the Tao. It was definitely a supreme technique. Millions of terrifying ferocious birds charged down in a frenzy. Boom! Both sides collided directly. Countless divine abilities in martial arts were fighting and suppressing each other. Just when Dan Emperor thought that this stalemate would continue, he suddenly saw Yi Shiwen take a step forward. His imposing aura suddenly rose by a lot. The might of his divine fist became even more terrifying. The balance that he had just maintained collapsed in an instant. The Feather Emperor was sent flying thousands of miles away by the impact of this terrifying power. Meanwhile, Yi Shiwen's entire body was flashing with golden light. It was as if he was a terrifying existence cast from gold. His clothes were fluttering in the wind due to the shock waves of the explosion. Suddenly, right at this moment, another unexpected event occurred. Loud laughter sounded out from the sky. Feather Emperor, you're really too useless. Looks like you don't have the fortune to enjoy this shapeless spirit bone. Leave everything to me. A gigantic hand reached out of the void and grabbed the corpse of the patriarch of the golden sky-devouring python. You're courting death. How dare you snatch something from my hands? Although Yi Shiwen was still in the battle with the Feather Emperor, he reacted immediately. Taiyu's sword in his hand suddenly moved. Endless sword aura surged in his hand. In an instant, all of them turned into sword talismans and formed a long sword river. Then he suddenly attacked. Bang! The gigantic hand was cut by the sword radiance of Yi Shiwen's Taiyu sword. It turned into a mass of spiritual energy on the spot and collapsed in all directions. How dare you? Dan Emperor was instantly furious. This matter could be said to be endless. This made him uncontrollably angry. Although he was not good at fighting, he was still an emperor. Naturally, his combat power was not that weak. He immediately took a step forward. Instantly, endless pill aura was released from his body. In an instant, it triggered a change in the power of heaven and earth. It was condensed into a huge pill cauldron by him and smashed towards the void. Clang! The sound of metal colliding rang out. The Pill Emperor's cauldron was actually grabbed by a huge hand. Then, the hand slowly exerted force, and the cauldron began to shatter inch by inch. It turned into a terrifying shockwave that spread in all directions. However, that person's figure slowly emerged. That person had a shark's head, and his body was covered with scales like a fish. His limbs were thick and powerful. He looked extremely fierce. Emperor Sea Shark, you're following me? You Emperor grimaced. Unexpectedly, another person had popped up along the way. From the moment you came to investigate the sky-devouring Python clan, I had already sensed it. My clan and the sky-devouring Python clan are competing for the hegemony of this sea region. Our relationship is not good. This is something that everyone knows. Anyone who wants to harm the sky-devouring Python clan must come to my clan. How could you hide your actions from me? The shark man sneered, his expression full of pleasure. After he finished speaking, the Emperor of Yu's expression became even more unsightly. He had never thought that while he was scheming against someone else, he would also fall into someone else's trap. Do you think that your little trick could provoke the sky-devouring Python tribe to have such a big reaction? If my tribe didn't help you, none of you would have been able to get in here. Emperor Sea Shark laughed. My tribe has been drooling over the phaseless spirit bone of the sky-devouring Python tribe for a long time. Finally, it's going to fall into our hands. The mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. Anyway, I'm not sure who will be the oriole. Yishuan calmly looked at the two in front of him. Wait until that big guy comes back. Can you two run away? Yishuan was confident because he had the devil wings. Moreover, he had touched the wings of time. Even if the opponent was strong, he was sure that he could run away. It wasn't a big deal. Don't worry, he can't come here for a while. My tribe's forefather will deal with him. It's enough to stop him. Emperor Sea Shark chuckled. Apparently, he was confident about this. As soon as they knew you Emperor's plan, they had prepared well. Moreover, although this place was the territory of the sky-devouring Python tribe, it wasn't far from their territory. Thus, they could use their great power. Don't worry. Now that I'm here, don't even think about getting the phaseless spirit bone. Emperor Sea Shark said contentedly, his face arrogant, as if telling them to get lost was giving them face. If that big guy can't come here for a while, it's good. I can beat you all to death. Yishuan didn't mind. Taoist Emperor, you stay here to support me. Leave this to me. Alchemy Emperor could only nod his head solemnly. There was no other way. His cultivation level was lower than the three of them, not to mention that he wasn't good at fighting. The three people in front of him were clearly experts in martial arts. If they really fought, he could only hold them back at most. He wouldn't be able to help at all. Emperor Sea Shark's face darkened. He looked at Yishuan coldly. Seems like you don't want to accept a toast, only to drink a forfeit. In the blink of an eye, he made his move. He shot forward like a bolt of lightning, unleashing a punch that caused everything to freeze. It was as if all of the power had been absorbed by the Dong River, and even the magical laws were frozen solid and completely destroyed. In such an environment, the ice-class principle he cultivated was like a fish in the water. Emperor Sea Shark took action when he said he would. He didn't linger or hesitate at all. Apparently, he had absolute confidence in himself. Even the experts at the Fourth Realm couldn't resist this punch. Yishuan could feel that Emperor Sea Shark's competence wasn't ordinary. He was even stronger than Feather King. He was at the peak of Fourth Realm. Facing ordinary peak of Fourth Realm experts, he could defeat Feather King easily. However, Emperor Sea Shark wanted to deal with Yishuan. Anyway, Yishuan knew that no matter what, he didn't have much time. He had to finish this battle quickly. Rule the world. As soon as Yishuan unleashed his sword, it instantly triggered the resonance of the Sword Tao laws between the heavens and the earth. At this moment, all of them condensed and slashed down like a mountain. The heaviness of the earth laws also appeared on the Tai Yu sword. Bang! The sword light directly hit the icicle. The principles of the two sides collided, swallowed, and fought, creating two terrifying shockwaves. You want to resist me here? Emperor Sea Shark was surprised. He didn't think that Yishuan could be that fierce. In this environment, his fighting competence was much stronger than in other places. It was the biggest advantage that the creatures in the Stormy Sea area had when facing the experts of the Fortune God Dynasty. He didn't expect that Yishuan could stop his attack with just one slash of his sword. Who was he after all? He was the overlord of this sea area. Although he didn't dare to say that he knew everything about the Fortune God Dynasty, at least he knew something about it. It was impossible that he didn't have any information about an emperor sea shark. It was illogical. There were also many people in the Fortune Divine dynasty who were bribed by these foreign existences, becoming their vanguard and being used by them. Therefore, they had always been very well informed. I don't care who you are. You must die. Emperor Sea Shark's eyes had a savage gleam. His hands moved continuously. Immediately, endless cold air rolled from his hands. What was strange was that although it was extremely cold, it didn't freeze the seawater around. It showed that his understanding of ice power Upanishad had reached the peak. Boom! Emperor Sea Shark took action one more time. Chapter 3057. Yi Shiwen didn't want to be outdone. His aura was released to the extreme. The terrifying power of the peak of Fourth Realm burst out completely. 6 paths of reincarnation fist. Yi Shiwen took one step forward. He was like a human-shaped dragon, pouncing forward and clashing with Emperor Sea Shark. Boom! 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 The shockwaves from their fight almost flattened the entire graveyard of the sky-devouring ominous python clan. It was extremely terrifying. The two of them clashed again and again. No one knew how many times they had exchanged blows. Every time they exchanged blows, the earth and sky would tremble. Emperor Sea Shark was stronger than Emperor Yu. Facing Yi Shiwen's attacks, he didn't seem to be in a disadvantageous position. However, to Emperor Sea Shark, it was already unimaginable. In the same realm, he was in a disadvantageous position. Although he wasn't in a disadvantageous position, it was already unbelievable to him. It should be known that the creatures in the outer domain were mostly natural-born ferocious creatures. Compared to the cultivators of the Fortune God dynasty, although their understanding of principle wasn't as deep, their physical combat strength was one level higher. Moreover, the divine tools they refined with their bodies could even compete with the Tao tools refined by Emperor Realm experts using super divine materials from heaven and earth. From this, one could see how terrifying these creatures were. However, this human in front of him could resist his physical body and even gain the upper hand. This completely subverted his worldview. Facing such a battle, the more Yi Shiwen fought, the more excited he became. His gilded tyrant form hadn't made a breakthrough for a long time. It was only strengthened as his cultivation increased, but it didn't advance by leaps and bounds. Although it was strong, it wasn't enough for Yi Shiwen. Even so, he didn't have a solution because he couldn't find a worthy opponent. However, he now found that the bodies of these creatures from the outer domain were extremely strong. Perhaps if this continued, his gilded tyrant form would be able to break through the shackles and enter a whole new level. For a cultivator, the physical body was like a boat. How far one could go and how strong one's physical body was crucial. If he wanted to improve further in the future and even aspire to the legendary Celestial Master Realm, his physical body cultivation must improve further. Now that he saw hope, how could he not be excited? Even with his state of mind of an imperial emperor, he couldn't help but be excited in the face of such a possibility. It was just a possibility. Even if it could become a reality, he would have to spend a lot of effort to deduce it. However, it was enough to have such a possibility. Yi Shiwen seemed to understand something. The spiritual power in his body moved faster and faster, and the battle became fiercer. At first, Emperor Sea Shark thought that he was just in a disadvantageous position. However, shortly after, he felt a tremendous pressure. Yi Shiwen's fighting competence was like a spark ignited by someone. He rocketed up in just a blink of an eye. In just a blink of an eye, Emperor Sea Shark was subdued. Under Yi Shiwen's attacks, Emperor Sea Shark had to back off continuously. When Yi Shiwen punched him away, he had smashed through the sea water and turned it into ashes. On the other side, when Emperor Yu saw that the two of them had started fighting, he immediately had another idea. He took a big step forward and formed a huge hand to grab the corpse of the golden sky-devouring ominous python patriarch. Now that the two of them were fighting, neither of them had the time to care about him. Feather Emperor, don't even think about it. At this time, the cauldron above Dendi Emperor's head grew bigger. In a flash, it seemed to swallow the entire world. Boom! The giant hand hit the cauldron directly, creating an earth-shaking explosion. However, it couldn't smash the cauldron completely. Dindy Emperor, you think you can stop me? Feather Emperor was enraged. First, he had Yi Shiwen as his roommate. Then, Emperor Sea Shark appeared. And now, Dindy, who he didn't put in his eyes, dared to stop him. Feather Emperor's feather robe fluttered. He flew out instantly, pressing down on Dindy Emperor. Boom! The two peerless emperors collided in just a blink of an eye. Feather Emperor wanted to snatch the phaseless spirit bone before Yi Shiwen could do it. He was desperate. The final result was that both sides would get hurt and no one would get it. However, Emperor Sea Shark had come to stir things up, which gave him a new chance to burn the phaseless spirit bone. This time, he would never give up. Instantly, the entire graveyard of the sky-devouring ominous Python clan had become two battlefields. The four experts at the Emperor Sea Shark's level had started their battle, which almost shattered the entire space. If this place didn't have the Emperor-level sky-devouring ominous Python's corpse, which strengthened the space many times, this place would have collapsed already. However, under the fierce energy fluctuations, the space was still like a piece of paper. It shook hard as if it could shatter at any minute. Yi Shiwen had just broken through to the peak of the fourth realm in a short period of time. Compared with the initial stage of the fourth realm, there was an earth-shaking change. Even Yi Shiwen hadn't been able to fully grasp this change. Now that he was fighting against a super master of the same realm, he was gradually forcing out this change. Yi Shiwen had pushed Emperor Sea Shark into a disadvantageous position. Yi Shiwen's series of attacks made him unable to lift his head. It was the first time he was subdued like that in a battle at the same realm. The martial Emperor Seal above Yi Shiwen's head spun, pressing down on Emperor Sea Shark. Surprisingly, the martial Emperor Seal created another Yi Shiwen, suppressing everywhere. And now, Yi Shiwen's real body directly dashed toward Emperor Sea Shark. He wanted to fight against two Emperor Sea Shark at the same time. Yi Shiwen's sudden attack startled Emperor Sea Shark, who was fighting against Dan Emperor. He felt a strong sense of danger. He turned around and saw Yi Shiwen holding the Taiwes sword. In just one step, Yi Shiwen had crossed the space and slashed at him. Emperor Sea Shark was so scared that his hair stood on end. Damn it, Emperor Sea Shark can't even stop him. Emperor Sea Shark roared indignantly. However, Emperor Sea Shark couldn't care about him anymore. Yi Shiwen's martial Emperor Seal had even created a tool spirit to subdue him. He didn't have time to care about the others. How could he be so fierce? Emperor Sea Shark screamed indignantly in his head. He could fight one against two. It wasn't just suppressing low-realm Emperor Sea Shark. Even if he was suppressing Dan Emperor, the two of them were enough to give him a headache. And now, Yi Shiwen was trying to subdue the two of them. Emperor Sea Shark was enraged and frightened at the same time. Yi Shiwen was too domineering. Countless feathers flew out of the Feather Emperor's body and condensed into a real body. Then, it rushed towards Yi Shiwen and blocked his path forward. Swoosh! Before the true feather body could play its role, a ray of sword light swept into the true feather body and exploded on the spot. This true body was enough to stop a fourth realm expert. However, it couldn't even stop Yi Shiwen's attack. The difference between them was too big. Emperor Sea Shark shivered. He attacked again, forcing Dan Emperor to back off. Then, he dashed toward Yi Shiwen. At this moment, he didn't have any other option. Yi Shiwen was coming aggressively. He was more than enough to deal with Dan Emperor. However, facing Yi Shiwen at the same time, it wasn't enough. Heaven's emergence, Great Tao. The Feather Emperor let out a loud roar as he unleashed a supreme divine ability. In an instant, the natural laws of heaven and earth changed color, as if they were undergoing a transformation, transforming into something of a higher level. In the blink of an eye, everything shattered. The Heaven's Emergence Great Tao seemed to be turning into a scripture. It contained the supreme Great Tao. It was an extremely impressive technique and scripture. This Heaven's Emergence Great Tao shouldn't be ordinary. Yi Shiwen's expression froze slightly. He could immediately tell that the heaven's emergence great way contained many things that even surpassed the way of the emperor. The fact that the Emperor was able to achieve Tao through this was indeed extraordinary. It even surpassed many of the great ways that Yi Shiwen had previously known. However, no matter how powerful a great Tao was, it depended on who was using it. For Yi Shiwen, it was enough as long as he was strong enough to defeat everything. Boom! The Taiyu sword in Yi Shiwen's hand erupted with waves of law light. In an instant, the heaven's emergence great Tao that was about to turn into a scripture exploded on the spot. However, in the next instant, Yi Shiwen's sword light had already penetrated the scripture and slashed toward Emperor Sea Shark. Damn it! How can he be so strong? Emperor Sea Shark used an amazing technique and barely escaped from Yi Shiwen's sword light. He moved hundreds of miles away in an instant. His heart was still trembling in fear. Yi Shiwen's movements were too fast. Compared to before, he didn't know how much faster he was. However, this was just the beginning. In the next instant, Yi Shiwen appeared almost at the same time as him. He slashed down with his sword again. The sword will of the ruler's sword spread out in all directions. In an instant, it was about to dominate the world and become the only ruler between heaven and earth. This sword will was extremely terrifying and overbearing. In an instant, it dominated the world. The terrifying pressure crushed down on him. In fact, he felt suffocated. He felt like he was about to spit out blood. Whatever. I'll go all out. I don't believe that you can really fight against two people at the same time. Emperor Sea Shark roared again and again. The light from his feather clothes illuminated the entire sea. The ultimate Emperor Tao aura spread into the sky. Chapter 3058. Awesome! Dan Emperor thought that agreeing to let Yi Shiwen join them was the right thing to do. If it wasn't like that, Emperor Yu and Emperor Sea Shark would be eyeing the non-phase spirit bone. Otherwise, he wouldn't have a chance. But now, Yi Shiwen could fight against two at the same time. He was so powerful. His aura alone was invincible. No doubt, Yi Shiwen was an outstanding expert among emperors. Daoist Dendi, take the formless spirit bone first, and then leave. Leave this to me? Yi Shiwen used secret sound transmission. Dendi didn't dare to linger. He hurried to grab the corpse of the golden, sky-devouring, ominous python's forefather. He created a giant hand and directly grabbed a part of the formless spirit bone. You're courting death. Emperor Yu was enraged. He didn't get it, but Dendi took it away. However, he couldn't free his hand now. Yi Shiwen slashed down with the Taiyu sword. He had to use all of his power to resist Yi Shiwen. He couldn't stop Dendi. Then, I'm leaving. Daoist Dendi, you don't need to fight. Retreat quickly. Dendi hurried to use secret sound transmission to remind him. At this moment, he could feel two powerful existences fighting nearby. Don't worry. I'll pay attention, said Yi Shiwen. His face was solemn, but he didn't feel uncomfortable. Daoist Dendi, I want you dead. Emperor Sea Shark, he's ferocious. If we don't join hands, do we have to stand and watch him take all the amorphous spirit bones? The Feather Emperor roared. He clearly saw that only a part of the formless spirit bone that the patriarch of the golden sky-devouring python had evolved had been taken. There was still a part left. They still had a chance. Okay, let's join hands. Emperor Sea Shark bellowed indignantly. Shortly after, his body swayed and 5 shadows appeared. Every one of these 5 figures possessed the strength to contend against Yi Shiwen's main body. The 5 of them pounced towards him and surrounded the tool spirit of the martial Emperor's seal. Then, each of them unleashed an astonishing move. Their moves converged into a mighty torrent and bombarded towards Yi Shiwen to kill him. The attacks of these 5 people came one after another, like raging waves. Wave after wave of attacks came crashing over, stacking layer upon layer. The power of their attacks was increased to the limit. Boom! The series of attacks burst forth in an instant. They actually managed to blast open the spirit formation and seal of the martial Emperor's seal in an instant. They instantly broke free from the suppression of the martial Emperor's seal. What a good martial technique. It's really powerful. But it ends here. The tool spirit of the martial emperor seal was restored in the next moment. The dimness that had been caused by the shattering had also been restored in the next moment. It had been completely restored under the replenishment of Yi Shiwen's main body. As the martial emperor seal spun, it grew larger and larger. It was like an ancient divine mountain, enveloping the sky and spreading out in all directions. What? How could it be? Emperor Sea Shark was astounded. His 5 overlapping waves was the supreme secret technique of his tribe. Even the experts at the same realm couldn't endure the 5 continuous attacks. They would be wounded severely in just a blink of an eye, let alone a tool spirit. However, although the martial emperor seal was broken, it recovered in just a blink of an eye. Thus, it didn't matter if it was broken or not. Thinking about this, he almost vomited blood. Yi Shiwen was high and aloof. He could see everything. Emperor Sea Shark's 5 overlapping waves had even aroused his interest. It wasn't that he had never seen this kind of martial technique before. However, it was only effective against the warriors below the Emperor realm. He was still able to deduce the accumulation of this level of force from many martial arts below the Sovereign Emperor level, but it was a completely different realm for the Sovereign Emperor level. He could blast out the greatest power at once. But he had no clue how to do it in such a continuous manner, with each wave stronger than the last, and finally forming a terrifying destructive power. However, Emperor Sea Shark's 5 layered brutal waves had given him a lot of inspiration. In the next moment, his eyes were replaced by a gold light. He seemed to enter an ethereal state. The mysterious space in his body started to calculate crazily. At this moment, he had more than half of the heaven-swallowing python tribe's spirit vein in his body. He was filthy rich, so it wasn't a problem for him to calculate crazily. It's now! Feather Emperor clearly felt that Yi Shiwen seemed to have entered into a state of enlightenment. His face suddenly revealed a somewhat happy look. Under normal circumstances, entering a concealed state of epiphany was something that even an Emperor Lord could only dream of. However, entering a state of epiphany during a battle was a completely different story. Although Emperor Sea Shark didn't know what he was comprehending, it was the best time to take action. Heaven's emergence great path. The Feather Emperor roared. Instantly, the entire world was filled with the praises of the gods. It was as if there were many powerful gods chanting ancient scriptures and praises everywhere. Yi Shiwen suddenly opened his eyes when this attack was about to hit him. It seemed as if a whole new world had opened up around him as he opened his eyes. It was a brand new universe, and he was the only existence that had existed since ancient times in this universe. He was the only true God. This immortal emergence, great Tao, fell on Yi Shiwen's body and eventually fell into the time domain. It broke through layer by layer and was also swallowed by the time domain layer by layer. It was completely melted in this time domain. No matter how Emperor Feather used his martial techniques, he couldn't break Yi Shiwen's time domain. It seemed like all of his attacks were blocked. As his attacks became wider and wider, his time domain also gradually became stronger. Even a peerless emperor with a firm mind like Emperor Feather had a feeling that he couldn't resist. Martial Emperor, do you really want to use your power to subdue the two of us? Dan Emperor has taken a part of the amorphous spirit bone. You're risking your life to help him. What benefits do you get? It's just a pellet. If you help me, I can give you one. Emperor Feather shouted indignantly. That's right, Martial Emperor. A character like you shouldn't fall like this. If you're willing to join our Sea Emperor Shark clan, I can make you the Great Elder. Emperor Sea Shark roared indignantly. He tried to break the suppression of the Martial Emperor's seal. However, he found that he couldn't do anything. No matter how stingy you are with your words, it's useless. Yi Shiwen sneered again and again. He wasn't moved by their words. He knew that it didn't matter whether it was the Feather Emperor or the Sea Emperor Shark. They seemed to be admitting defeat under his suppression. However, it would be another matter once they were free. Especially the Sea Emperor Shark. The patriarch of their clan was currently engaged in a fierce battle outside. The patriarch of the ominous Python clan might come over at any time. Thus, he was stalling for time. Did he think that Yi Shiwen couldn't see it? No, perhaps they knew it. They just wanted to try. As long as Yi Shiwen wavered a little bit, he couldn't seal them. Today you're going to die. You don't know why you're going to die. You think you can get my amorphous spirit bone? Yi Shiwen sneered. Until now, the two of them hadn't given up on the amorphous spirit bone. In Yi Shiwen's eyes, the amorphous spirit bone was already in his bag. He wouldn't allow anyone else to touch it. Yi Shiwen, you alone can't subdue the two of us. Moreover, do you think you can escape the deadly attack of the Sea Emperor Shark clan and the Sky Emperor Python clan? Don't think too much. Emperor Sea Shark was enraged. He tried to use the prestige of the Sea Emperor Shark clan to scare Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen just sneered. It's come to this, and you still don't want to give up. You deserve to die. Now, I will show you the difference between us. As soon as he finished, he burst out all of a sudden. His aura skyrocketed, and his murderous aura rocketed, as if he had created thousands of murderous auras and thousands of death gods. 6 paths of reincarnation fist. He punched. Instantly, the formidable fist energy turned into a massive 6 paths of reincarnation that wanted to subdue the entire world. It wanted to turn everything into nothingness. Boom! The fist landed directly on Yu Huang's body. Yu Huang repeatedly used the great Tao of Feather to defend against it. The unparalleled power of the fist forced Yu Huang to retreat repeatedly. His chest trembled, and he almost coughed up blood. And just when he thought that he had blocked all of the fist power of the 6 paths of reincarnation fist, something unexpected happened. Suddenly, that terrifying power seemed to have been reborn and rushed over for the second time. Originally, just blocking the first wave of attack was already too much for him to bear, let alone the second wave of attack that instantly pounced over to kill him. Boom! His power of the Great Way of Emergence had already been exhausted, but he was unable to react to the second attack at all. He was instantly hit by the attack, and his entire body seemed to have suffered a heavy blow. Finally, he could not control a mouthful of blood and suddenly spat it out. Then his body was sent flying. In just a blink of an eye, he was wounded severely. Emperor Yu clutched the big hole in his chest that Yi Shiwen had created. Blood oozed from the gaps between his fingers. It was a bloody mess. His eyes were still filled with disbelief. How was this possible? The second wave of attacks had appeared without the slightest warning. It's the 5 overlapping waves. Emperor Sea Shark gawked and mumbled to himself. Chapter 3059. It's Brutal Waves 5-layer. Emperor Sea Shark gawked, mumbling to himself. He had already recognized Yi Shiwen's Fierce Waves 5 overlapped technique. Of course, there was still a big gap between it and their orthodox Fierce Waves 5 overlapped technique. That was because they could stack 5 layers in a row, and each layer was more frightening than the one before it. At a high level, they could even unleash the combined power of 5 attacks. Even Yi Futian hadn't reached that level yet. He could only unleash 5 attacks in a row. Even so, it was already very powerful. He had fought for the Sea Sovereign Shark clan, and he didn't know how many experts from other clans had suffered at his hands. Their clan's ominous waves, stacking 5 layers, was a well-known divine ability. Of course, he couldn't be wrong about this. However, what made him almost spurt out blood was that it wasn't him who had used it. It was Yi Shiwen. He was sure that Yi Shiwen didn't know how to use it. Otherwise, he wouldn't have used it like that. It was just a half-finished product. Although it was just a half-finished product, its power was tremendous. One strike had wounded Emperor Sea Shark. Of course, it was because Emperor Sea Shark hadn't prepared for it. Even so, it was enough to shock him. Yi Shiwen shouldn't have been able to learn the orthodox method of ominous waves 5 overlapping. So there was only one possibility, and that was to learn it on the spot, which was much more terrifying than anything else. This kind of technique was classified as a secret technique even in their clan. Moreover, it was because of the special physique of their clan that they could erupt with 5 overlapping techniques. However, Yi Shiwen had only seen it once, and he was able to deduce it to this extent. Was he really a monster? It was the first time Emperor Sea Shark had such a thought. The Emperor-level creatures could sit on the same level as the Emperor-level creatures. Thus, to the Emperor-level experts, They didn't have the concept of monsters because they themselves were the biggest monsters. However, at this moment, they couldn't help but have such a thought. They were frightened by Yi Shiwen. It wasn't that they hadn't seen people with high comprehension ability. Those who could become emperor-class creatures and sovereign emperors were all outstanding individuals. However, they had never heard of someone with such amazing comprehension ability. This was no longer comprehension, it was simply duplication. Yi Shiwen only felt that his body was filled with surging power. This was the first time he had used Fierce Wave's fivefold technique, so he was not completely confident in using it, so he was still a bit shaky, but soon he had completely mastered the first layer of Fierce Wave's fivefold technique. This magical power was indeed very advanced. Even with his current cultivation, it was impossible for him to deduce it casually. Deducing the first layer of the five-layered ominous waves had already consumed a great deal of his mental and physical strength. Moreover, it had also consumed a large amount of the Dragon Vein's energy. If he wanted to deduce it completely, it would take a lot of time and energy. After all, he didn't have a complete cultivation method. Otherwise, he could save a lot of time. Soul-searching didn't work on an emperor at the same level. Even if he could capture Emperor Sea Shark, he would explode himself in the end. But even so, this was a rare magical technique for Yi Shiwen at present. All of this took a long time to describe, but it happened in just a blink of an eye on the battlefield. Feather King was blown away by Yi Shiwen's two waves. He was wounded severely. Compared to Emperor Sea Shark, he was even more astounded. Yi Shiwen's attack had made him feel like the sky was going to collapse and the earth was going to collapse. Die for me. Yi Shiwen took one step forward and directly caught up with Feather King. After one strike had wounded Feather King, Yi Shiwen didn't hesitate and stormed forward. 6 paths of reincarnation fist. Yi Shiwen roared and punched. The terrifying fist energy crossed the sea and directly pierced through everything. For Yi Shiwen, the ominous waves 5-layered technique was not only a kind of magical power, but also a kind of technique. Once he had thoroughly mastered this magical power, he would be able to use all of his martial arts, and his fighting prowess would soar to the next level. Feather King was enraged. He could see Yi Shiwen's murderous intent. Yi Shiwen wanted to kill him. Even in the worst situation, he had never thought that he would die here. To him, the worst outcome was that both of them would be wounded and no one would be able to get the phaseless spirit bone. He didn't think that he could kill Yi Shiwen. The price of killing an Emperor Lord was too high. It was so high that he didn't dare to try it. Not to mention whether he could kill Yi Shiwen or not. That was another question. But now, Yi Shiwen really wanted to kill him. He wanted to kill him. This immediately made him furious. Endless power swept out from his body. I will show you how wrong it is for you to have such a thought. Feather King struck out the Feather Transformation Dao. He combined the Dao of many ferocious birds that he cultivated and blasted towards Yi Shiwen. He had already sensed Yi Shiwen's murderous intent. Naturally, he didn't dare to hold back. Otherwise, he would be severely injured even if he didn't die. Being severely injured in such an environment was almost no different from being killed on the spot. It's too late to resist now. You have thoughts that you shouldn't have. Yi Shiwen sneered. His 6 paths of reincarnation turned into the 6 paths of reincarnation wheel, suppressing everything in the world. Under the terrifying power of the double-layered force, the 6 paths of reincarnation fist combat power was doubled. When the fist came down, Feather King's Feather Transformation Dao was no match for it. It was smashed into pieces. Yi Shiwen's attack penetrated Feather King's Feather Transformation Dao and hit Feather King directly. Feather King's Feather Transformation Dao appeared immediately. He wanted to block Yi Shiwen's attack, but it was useless. On Yi Shiwen's palm, the dark Bodhi Divine Hand appeared, and the power of his 6 paths of reincarnation fist increased dramatically. Bam! Feather King was blasted away again. His entire body instantly exploded. This time, even the feather armor could not protect him. His physical body cracked instantly. Yi Shiwen's double-layered force was too terrifying. Yi Shiwen's peak strength was already above his, let alone now that he was using his full strength. Feather King's cracked body tried to reform in the void. He flew into the distance, trying to escape from Yi Shiwen's palm. But how could Yi Shiwen give him such a chance? He rushed forward and stomped on Feather King's body that had just reformed. With a violent stomp, Feather King's physical body exploded on the spot. Blood splattered again, and bone fragments flew everywhere. Ark, Yi Shiwen, I will not rest until one of us is dead. Feather King screamed. His entire physical body was crushed by Yi Shiwen's stomp. Even his spirit could not escape this attack and was almost annihilated. Only a trace of his spirit was left, and it fled into the distance. An Emperor Lord's physical body would not die so easily, but he could not care so much at this time. He knew very well that as long as Yi Shiwen was here, it would be useless no matter how great his physical recovery ability was. No matter how much he recovered, he would not be able to catch up with Yi Shiwen's killing speed. You want to leave? Yi Shiwen smiled coldly. The Taiyu sword appeared in his hand, and he suddenly slashed down. Ark! Feather King screamed and exploded on the spot. His spirit was also completely turned into ashes by Yi Shiwen's sword. Without the protection of his physical body, his spirit was too fragile in front of Yi Shiwen. It wasn't that he didn't know this, but he had been forced to this point by Yi Shiwen. He would die if he escaped, and he would die if he didn't escape. He had no other choice but to fight desperately to see if there was any hope of escaping. But in the end, Yi Shiwen completely annihilated his hope. Feather Emperor had died a tragic death after he had lost his soul, and all the things on his body had fallen into Yi Shiwen's hands. Yi Shiwen had used his divine sense to explore his treasure house and had discovered a huge harvest. It turned out that Feather Emperor had been secretly collecting a lot of medicinal herbs all these years. And just like Dan Emperor, he was also missing the amorphous spirit bone. And he would be able to refine a finished pill as long as he obtained the amorphous spirit bone. This was great news for Yi Shiwen. He also had the heart to refine medicinal pellets, but he did not know how much time it would take to collect the medicinal materials. This saved him a lot of effort. After killing Feather King, Yi Shiwen kept Feather King's physical body into his bag, and then turned his attention to the golden sky devouring fierce Python's corpse. Dan Emperor had taken a piece of the phaseless spirit bone, and the rest were all here. Whoosh! Yi Shiwen formed a big hand, and directly grabbed the golden sky devouring fierce Python's corpse. All of a sudden, so many water arrows pierced the sky, aiming at Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen glanced at Emperor Sea Shark in the distance and sneered. At this moment, you still have the mood to disturb me. Seems like you're really obsessed with the phaseless spirit bone. Anyway, you can't even protect yourself now. Then his big hand snatched. Those water arrows couldn't affect Yi Shiwen. He squeezed them and exploded instantly. It was just a distraction. Emperor Sea Shark was restrained by the martial Emperor's seal, so he didn't have extra power to deal with Yi Shiwen. This kind of distraction could work on others, but it wasn't enough to deal with Yi Shiwen. Martial Emperor, you killed him. You're dead. You're dead. You're dead. Wait until the chief of my tribe comes. It will be your death. Emperor Sea Shark roared. He wasn't sad because of Feather King's death. He was frightened by Yi Shiwen's brutal deeds. Yi Shiwen dared to kill him. That's right. We have to settle it before your patriarch arrives. Chapter 3060. This battle had consumed a lot of time. If the patriarchs of the Sea Emperor Shark clan and the Sky Devouring Python clan hadn't fought to buy him more time, he could have taken the corpse of the Gold Sky Devouring Python clan's patriarch and had to spare Emperor Feather and Emperor Sea Shark. He couldn't underestimate any expert at the Emperor realm. Thus, Yi Shiwen didn't want to leave any trouble for himself. After Yi Shiwen took the corpse of the Gold Sky Devouring Python clan's patriarch into his body, he immediately dashed toward Emperor Sea Shark. Martial Emperor, don't even think about it. Emperor Sea Shark roared indignantly. He knew it was the last moment. If he died, he wouldn't have a chance to save himself. At this moment, Yi Shiwen held the long sword in his hand. The Taiyu sword emitted a murderous aura. His murderous aura was boundless. Endless principles were flowing and expanding everywhere. It made people gawk and drop their jaws. Yi Shiwen's aura had reached the acme. Swoosh! Suddenly, Yi Shiwen's sword slashed down. The terrifying sword light radiated endless rays of light in all directions and turned into a splendid multicolored light. Rumble! As soon as the sword slashed down, everything froze. All the principals stopped moving. Emperor Sea Shark roared continually. He wanted to struggle and resist. However, the martial Emperor Seal was spinning above his head. It didn't give him a chance to breathe and subdued everything. He felt like he was sinking into an endless swamp. He couldn't even move, let alone anything else. Countless scales grew on his body to protect him. At this critical moment, he could only use this method to protect himself. Bang! The attack hit his body. So many scales shattered under the sword light. They couldn't gather again. Tui, Emperor Sea Shark, spurted blood. His body was blown backward. He had almost been smashed into pieces. Yi Shiwen's sword was too heavy. Roar! Emperor Sea Shark was hurt badly by Yi Shiwen. He returned to his real body. It was a massive beast, more than 10,000 meters long. He roared and roared, stirring up the wind and clouds in this sea area. 5 overlapping waves. Emperor Sea Shark roared in the sky. He turned into 5 clones and attacked Yi Shiwen. 5 waves of terrifying energy came one after another. Suppress them all. Martial Emperor Seal suppresses 8 directions. Yi Shiwen roared. It was unknown when he had flown to the sky above Huanshuang. He held the martial Emperor's seal in his hand and suddenly pressed it down. Boom! The martial monarch seal grew larger and larger until it was like a huge mountain crushing down on the 5 clones. Bang! 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 Although these clones were ferocious, if they could withstand the crushing power of the 5 great clones, they would all shatter in an instant. Yi Shiwen had been able to break through the seal of the martial Emperor's seal, even if it was only for a moment. However, it was because his body wasn't present. The tool spirit alone couldn't seal him. However, it was completely different now. With Yi Shiwen's control, its power had increased by more than a little. The 5 clones were like bubbles that burst after one poke. The martial Emperor's seal fell on Emperor Sea Shark as fast as lightning. Boom! All of it was like a thunderclap. After a massive explosion, a big hole appeared in the entire sea area. Emperor Sea Shark had created this hole. His body had been smashed into several pieces in this fierce collision. His huge body was also constantly struggling in the sky. Just as Yi Shiwen was about to attack further, 2 extremely tyrannical divine senses suddenly swept over from the sky. These 2 auras carried an incomparably angry emotion. They were brimming with violent and tyrannical auras. Stop! A senile voice arose from a distance, trying to stop Yi Shiwen from attacking Emperor Sea Shark. However, Yi Shiwen wouldn't let others control him. He had made up his mind to kill. His entire body emitted waves of gold light. Shortly after, he got rid of that soul consciousness. It couldn't affect his movement at all. It's the last sword. Yi Shiwen roared and took a step forward. The Taiwa sword in his hand suddenly turned into so many sword lights. It was like a long river of swords, furiously slashing towards Emperor Sea Shark. At this moment, Emperor Sea Shark had just congregated his body in the sea area. He grimaced and paled. To an emperor, it was a big consumption to be reborn. He couldn't come back to life without changing his visage. He had already sensed the divine sense of his patriarch and was secretly delighted. He was finally saved. But before he could rejoice, he saw the Taiyu sword in Yi Shiwen's hand had already slashed out countless sword lights, ruthlessly falling down. Bang! Emperor Sea Shark's body exploded on the spot. The sword chi had invaded his body and wreaked havoc in each of his cells and meridians. It had even killed Emperor Sea Shark's primordial spirit that had fused with his body. Roar! Emperor Sea Shark struggled unceasingly, but it was no use. His body rolled in the sea water for a while. Then he died. Emperor Sea Shark, a 4th realm emperor-level creature, the overlord of an area, died tragically in Yi Shiwen's hands. Yi Shiwen didn't hesitate. He took Emperor Sea Shark's body instantly. He didn't hesitate either. The devil wings on his back opened, and he teleported dozens of thousands of miles away in just a blink. Rumble! Just as he teleported away, a big bloody mouth appeared at the place where he had just been standing. It was a kind of magical power that could swallow the heavens and devour the earth. In an instant, the place where he had been standing was completely bitten into pieces. Even an Emperor Realm expert would die if he were to be bitten by it. The patriarch of the heaven-devouring ominous python clan had attacked Yi Shiwen a moment ago. Yi Shiwen would have been bitten to pieces even if he had possessed the gilded tyrant form. The patriarch of the heaven-devouring ominous python clan had practiced this heaven-devouring magical power to an extremely high level. The vibration behind him formed a terrifying shockwave and directly rushed towards his body. This caused his figure to sway slightly. However, he didn't stop. He used the dark Bodhi divine hand to tear open a crack in the space and escaped in an instant. Swoosh! 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 Yi Shiwen's figure constantly appeared in the void. Every time he flashed, he would appear hundreds of thousands of kilometers away. He had already exerted his speed to the limit, but it was still not enough. This was because the space in the Fortune God dynasty was many times stronger than in the myriad heavens world. Even with his Emperor Realm strength, it was impossible for him to teleport to the ends of the earth with just a thought. Two terrifying auras chased after him. Whether it was the patriarch of the sky-devouring ominous python tribe or the patriarch of the sea-sovereign shark tribe, they were completely enraged by Yi Shiwen. They couldn't wait to kill him to relieve the hatred in their hearts. Boom! 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 Behind Yi Shiwen, the void explosions and cracks were constantly exploding at an astonishing speed, forming a terrifying crack that directly rushed towards Yi Shiwen. It was thrilling to catch up with Yi Shiwen every time. Wings of space. The demon wings behind Yi Shiwen flashed with layers of light of the law of space. His whole body seemed to have completely merged with the space. In an instant, he disappeared in another place. Wings of time. Seeing that he couldn't get rid of the two people behind him, Yi Shiwen had no choice but to use the wings of time. This was his biggest trump card. His speed also rose to the peak. It even changed the flow of time, making his speed several times faster than before. Such a speed could be said to be top-notch. The patriarchs of the ominous Python clan and the Sea Emperor Shark clan were following behind them. However, they discovered that Yi Shiwen's silhouette was gradually getting further and further away after continuously following him for billions of miles. He gradually disappeared before their eyes. At this time, they didn't know how deep they had gone. They directly broke into other people's territory, rampaging all the way. It had already caused the displeasure of many powerful Emperor-level creatures. Divine senses with malicious intentions swept over them. Even with the cultivation of the two patriarchs, they couldn't fight all the Emperor-level creatures. They could only watch Yi Shiwen's figure gradually disappear in front of them. Roar! Roar! Two shocking roars exploded in the world. Yi Shiwen saw that the two auras behind him were gradually getting further away. Then, he gradually retracted the magical power of the Wings of Time. The speed of the Wings of Time was indeed extremely fast. At the same time, it consumed a lot of spiritual power. With his current spiritual power, he couldn't keep using it. Otherwise, his spiritual power would really be exhausted and he would be caught. Yi Shiwen heaved a sigh of relief. But now, he didn't know where he had flown to in this one breath of air. He had directly crossed billions of miles along the way. He didn't know where he was. Suddenly, he saw a towering city standing on an incomparably large island in the distance. From afar, it was extremely shocking. It was actually built with the giant mountain on the large island as the foundation, and it was built in circles around the large island. With the giant mountain in the center of the island as the center, layers of the city surrounded the island in all directions. It was unknown how many powerful cultivators and creatures lived in it. There's a city? Just right. Yi Shiwen was a little happy. He knew that in these super cities built by the Fortune God dynasty, there were often transmission arrays that could be directly transmitted to the hinterland of the Fortune God dynasty. At the same time, It was also convenient for the cities to support each other when they were attacked. Chapter 3061. After flying into the city, Yi Shiwen discovered that the entire city was even bigger than Storm City. Above the ancient city gate, 3 ancient characters, Heavenly Star City, were engraved on a plaque. Yi Shiwen stood in front of the city gate and stared at the 3 characters. He could faintly feel that there was a great Tao hidden in them. The person who wrote these 3 characters was undoubtedly a great expert among the great experts. Even the artistic conception was slightly superior to Yi Shiwen's current realm. Just looking at the year of writing, it was unknown how many years ago it was. From these 3 characters, Yi Shiwen could see a lot of things. After a long time, Yi Shiwen finally recovered from this state of enlightenment. He felt that he had gained a lot. At their realm, it could be said that the road ahead was cut off. Every step forward needed to continue the road on their own. At this time, being able to learn from other people's great Tao was also a great supplement for their own cultivation. Because their own great Tao was fixed, there was no need to worry about being misled by other people's great Tao. Yi Shiwen put away his thoughts and began to walk into the city. As soon as he entered the city, he felt the barrier around the city sweep over him and then disappear without a trace. Yi Shiwen immediately understood that this enchantment was used to check whether one was an alien creature or not. Those alien creatures were different from the gods of the Fortune God dynasty. Even an emperor-level creature would not be able to disguise themselves and enter the enchantment. They would be discovered by the enchantment. It was said that in these big cities at the edge of the Fortune God dynasty, there were arrays and barriers left by heavenly masters. These arrays were left behind during the most intense battle between the Fortune God dynasty and the foreign life forms. At that time, the battle between the Fortune God dynasty and the foreign life forms could be described as a river of blood. The entire sea of the foreign life forms was dyed red with blood. Boss, don't we need to stop that person and pay the entrance fee? When Yi Shiwen's figure disappeared into the city gate, a young soldier among the group of soldiers asked the middle-aged captain, "You look like a newcomer. Apart from you, did anyone else say a word?" The captain looked at the young soldier and said with a smile, because this young soldier was also a member of his mother's family, he was willing to give him some advice. Most importantly, he didn't want his subordinate to be blind and implicate him. The young soldier took a look. Indeed, apart from him, no one else looked at him. It was as if they didn't see him at all. What was going on? Do you really think they're all blind? Are you the only one who saw it? The captain smiled coldly and said, "We have to keep our eyes open for this job. We have to know who we can offend and who we can't. If we offend someone we can't afford to offend, we won't even know how we died. So that's how it is. But Captain, how did that person see that he was powerful? He looked no different from a mortal." The soldier asked in confusion. "You're new, so it's fine if you don't know. Normal people would be able to see through their attire, grandeur, and aura with their chi observation technique. However, he's different. You might think that he's no different from a normal person, but didn't you see how he looked at the signboard of Stellar Sky City? You saw it? So what?" The new soldier obviously didn't know the story behind it. "Do you think the signboard can be casually looked at? This is the work of a supreme, grand, heavenly venerate. Last month, there was an idiot god king who wanted to comprehend the great principles behind it. In the end, he turned into a rainbow and disappeared on the spot. I saw it all at that time," the captain said with a hint of disdain. Although a god king was already out of his reach, he still laughed at the stupidity of the other party. God king? The new soldier's eyes widened. For him, an expert at that level was undoubtedly out of his reach. Even if it was just the lowest level god king, destroying tens of thousands of rookies like him, who hadn't even reached the Tao realm, was just a matter of moving a finger. An existence of that level could directly turn into a rainbow because of Tao enlightenment. Did these 3 words look so terrifying? Although he had only been here for a few days, he had already seen this signboard countless times. However, nothing happened to him at all. No matter how he looked at it, it was incomparably magical, as if he was listening to some myth or legend. A god king is nothing. More than 10 years ago, There was a quasi-emperor level figure who heard about this signboard from somewhere and specially came here to comprehend the Tao. One day later, he was defeated. Although he didn't die, he was seriously injured. It was said that even his martial Tao consciousness was almost erased. This kind of thing has happened too many times since the establishment of Stellar Sky City. The captain said, later, I found out that it wasn't an ordinary quasi-emperor. He was an absolute expert among the quasi-emperors, a peak-stage quasi-emperor. Peak-stage quasi-emperor? That rookie soldier gasped. If a god-king was already a mythical existence to him, then a quasi-emperor was already beyond his imagination. He had never thought that he would meet an important figure of that level. Stellar Sky City was as large as a small continent. There were countless living beings and countless experts. Even so, a quasi-emperor was still a rare existence in Stellar Sky City. There were people who could call the wind and summon the rain in Stellar Sky City. As for the Arch, it was even more unthinkable. Although they were in the same city, they were actually people from two completely different worlds and dimensions. In that case, that could be. That rookie soldier gasped even more and didn't dare to say those two words. For an existence of that level, even saying those two words felt like blasphemy, especially when he actually had the idea to ask of the Arch about the city fees. He was simply courting death. That kind of person could blow him to death with just a breath. Fortunately, he didn't say anything casually just now. Otherwise, he would die with just a thought from the other party. That's right. That lord is likely to be the Arch. The captain nodded slowly. Although he was just a city gate officer, he had been a city gate officer for so many years. Even if he hadn't eaten pork, he had seen pigs run. Many of his experiences and knowledge were not comparable to this rookie soldier. He still vaguely remembered the scene when he saw Yi Shiwen. There were people coming and going on the roadside. Yi Shiwen stood on the road in the middle of the city gate. However, everyone passed by him, but no one felt the slightest hindrance or problem. People who passed by him would unconsciously go around him, but no one noticed his existence. Or it could be said that they felt that there was something strange about him, so they just went around him. If one closed their eyes, they might not be able to detect his existence at all. Looking at him, it was like looking at the endless sea. Thinking of this, he was excited. He had been a city gate officer for so many years, but he had never seen such a person. Even if he saw 100 peak quasi-emperors, there was no way they could be compared to an Arch. Just seeing such a great person at such a close distance was worth bragging about for a lifetime. He could brag about it to his children and grandchildren. In the Fortune God dynasty, the status of an Arch was also high and mighty. Although it was not as supreme as it was in the myriad heavens, it was not much worse. After a long while, he finally calmed himself down. He looked at the new soldier and asked, "Do you find it strange? You and I have been at this city gate for so long, and we have looked at this plaque for who knows how many years, but why don't we feel anything?" The rookie soldier scratched his head a little embarrassedly, then nodded. This was indeed his biggest doubt, because it is not something that we can understand. The great Tao contained inside is something that cannot be understood without reaching a certain level of existence. We don't even have the qualifications to look at it. So in our eyes, it is just an ordinary plaque, but in the eyes of many experts, it is a plaque that contains endless great Tao. Speaking of this, I suddenly remembered a legend related to this plaque. The captain paused for a moment, then said, "It is said that a long time ago, there was an invincible genius who sat under this plaque, meditating for 3,000 years, thus achieving the Tao, and later advanced to Emperor realm." The captain's face was full of envy as he said this. Speaking of which, they guarded this plaque every day, but it was useless. They still had to guard the city gate, guarding one of the greatest fortuitous encounters in the world, but there was no harvest. But someone was able to achieve the Tao because of this. The heavens were so unfair. They were all living beings, but some were superior, while others could only guard the city gate. Really? Who is it? The young soldier asked hurriedly. I don't know, that thing is too long ago. Anyway, this legend already existed before I took office. There are too many legendary things that happen under this plaque, but this thing is the most legendary. the captain said with emotion. If only the legend of this plaque was talked about, it would really be impossible to finish talking about it, even if he talked for 3 days and 3 nights. I am so envious. The rookie soldier was extremely envious. Since ancient times, how many living beings, how many outstanding heroes were able to leave their names on it? But only a few of them could leave their names on it, but it was just an individual. Don't be envious, guard the city well. In the future, marry a wife for your parents, give birth to children, and pass on the family name is the most important thing. Those myths, legends, miracles, and whatnot, they are too far away from us. Chapter 3062. Yi Shiwen entered the city. He could see all kinds of buildings everywhere. Buildings that were hundreds of feet high were also common, although it was not like the technological society of his previous life. But in a certain aspect, it seemed that they had embarked on the same path. Except for the completely different architectural styles, it was almost as if he had entered the modern society. "Sir, please wait." Suddenly, a voice stopped Yi Shiwen. He saw a young girl of about 18 or 19 years old coming out of a shop on the side. She respectfully saluted Yi Shiwen. Her eyes were sparkling, and she looked quite spirited. Her appearance was quite delicate and pretty. She was looking at Yi Shiwen with a bit of expectation in her eyes. But there was also a bit of nervousness. "Why did you stop me?" Yi Shiwen frowned slightly and asked. "I don't see you, sir. It should be your first time coming to Sky Star City," said the girl. "I'm Xioning. I'm a guide here all year round. It can be said that I know the Sky Star City like the back of my hand. I should be of help to you." The girl looked at Yi Shiwen a little nervously. She seemed to be afraid that he would refuse and fall out with her. She knew very well that she was nothing compared to those big shots. Those big shots would fall out with her just because of their mood. There was no need for any other reason. Therefore, this was actually a very dangerous job. "I'm sorry, I don't plan to stay here for long, so I don't need a guide." Yi Shiwen shook his head and said. The girl Xioning rolled her eyes and suddenly thought of something. She said, "Sir, you don't want to stay here for long, but you entered the city. Could it be that you want to use the teleportation array to teleport back to the mainland?" "You are a bit clever." Yi Shiwen nodded with a smile, but he did not deny it. This matter was not a secret, and he did not intend to hide it. Seeing that the girl Xioning did not intend to leave, he asked, "Why? Is there anything else?" "Sir, if you want to use the teleportation array to leave, I'm afraid it won't be so easy," said the girl Xioning. "Why?" asked Yi Shiwen. "Because the teleportation array has been controlled by heavenly Taoism. So, everyone who wants to pass through the teleportation array must be carefully searched." Xioning looked at Yi Shiwen and said, "It is said that they are searching for someone." Xioning would probably never have imagined that the person she spoke of that was being searched for was none other than the azure-clothed man before her. "Oh?" Yi Shiwen narrowed his eyes. He was naturally aware of this. So, he reacted almost immediately. The Heavenly Tao cult was searching for him if he hadn't guessed wrong. The Heavenly Tao cult hadn't given up after such a long time. Moreover, they had extended their tentacles to this place. It wouldn't be an easy task to control the transmission array of such a huge city, even if it was just to search for passersby. One would inevitably have to pay a high price. The fury of the Heavenly Taoist sect could be imagined. Originally, the Sky Tao sect's search had not been a problem for him. However, this time was different. He still had to go back and meet with Alchemy Emperor to get the Tai Vitality Condensation Elixir. The Tai Vitality Condensation Elixir was directly related to his hopes of breaking through to the fifth realm in a short time. The young girl Xioning glanced at Yi Shiwen carefully. She was also gambling. She was betting that such a big shot wouldn't be willing to be manipulated by others. She had seen many such big shots turn around because of this reason. This was indeed a problem for Yi Shiwen. Since the Heavenly Taoist sect dared to set up an inescapable net, they must have the confidence to make Yi Shiwen have nowhere to hide. Disguising himself didn't seem to be very useful. "Let me ask you, how far is the Heavenly Star City from the eastern region?" asked Yi Shiwen. The young girl Xioning frowned slightly and then said, "Actually, I don't know. I was born here and grew up here. I've never been to the mainland. However, as far as I know, the Heavenly Star City should be the big city that goes the furthest into the Stormy Sea region. Under normal circumstances, even divine kings and quasi-emperors can't pass through the Stormy Sea region and return to the Eastern region unless they rely on the transmission array. Yishuan asked some more about the Heavenly Star City. Only then did he understand that he had inadvertently gone very deep into the Stormy Sea region when he was avoiding the pursuit of the patriarch of the sky-devouring ominous Python clan and the patriarch of the Sea Emperor Shark clan. The Heavenly Star City was a fortress built by the Fortune God dynasty in the early years when they were constantly fighting with the foreign domains. It was also a forward base. In the past, the Fortune God dynasty was unparalleled. There were such bases and fortresses in many places in the Stormy Sea region. However, with the passage of time, these fortresses and cities were breached one by one. Now, only the Heavenly Star City was left among the super cities that were originally very deep into the Stormy Sea region. For example, the storm city that Yi Shiwen had passed through before was countless miles away from the Heavenly Star City. Even if an Emperor King wanted to pass through, it would be extremely troublesome. They could only rely on the teleportation array. Because of this, the Heavenly Star City had become the Fortune Divine Dynasty's nail in the Stormy Sea region. Many of the Fortune Divine Dynasty's experts were stationed there, and the foreign world's creatures also regarded this super city as a thorn in their side, wishing they could get rid of it as soon as possible. Therefore, all kinds of battles would break out almost every few days. It wasn't the first time that he had been besieged. Yi Shiwen frowned slightly, but he had a plan in his heart. According to the Heavenly Taoism, they had actually extended their influence to the Heavenly Star City that was deep in the Stormy Sea region. Obviously, they had made preparations in all aspects. Even if he returned to the Storm City, he would be detected by the Heavenly Taoism. He could roughly guess that the matter of him coming to the foreign domain should have been leaked. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been like this. Thinking of this, Yi Shiwen immediately made a decision. He wouldn't return to the Storm City for the time being. He would first stay in the Heavenly Star City and think about it after breaking through to the Fifth Realm. Although he didn't have the Tai Soul Gathering Pill on hand, he had all the medicinal materials needed to refine the Tai Soul Gathering Pill. Why couldn't he refine it himself? He had already seen the recipe of the Tai Soul Gathering Pill before. It wasn't very difficult. The main problem was that the medicinal materials were relatively difficult to collect, especially the phaseless spirit bone. Fortunately, the Yu Emperor had solved all the problems for him, saving him a lot of time. Although Yi Shiwen's research and understanding of alchemy were not comparable to that of a pill emperor, it was more than enough to refine the Tai Soul Gathering Pill. Yes, you have successfully convinced me. I will hire you as my guide for the next period of time. And if I am satisfied, I will also pay you satisfactory compensation. But if I am not satisfied, then don't even think about getting anything. Yi Shiwen slowly said, "That's right. This little girl will definitely satisfy you, my lord. Okay, take me to the biggest trading company in the city first," Yi Shiwen said. Xiaoning didn't ask why Yi Shiwen wanted to go to the trading company. In her line of work, the most taboo thing was to inquire about a lot of things that shouldn't be inquired about. It was safer to not know a lot of things. Yi Shiwen naturally had his own plans. If he wanted to refine the Tai Soul Gathering Pill, he would need a Dao Tool level pill cauldron. The Tai Soul Gathering Pill was a divine pill with a spirit. It couldn't be refined by an ordinary pill cauldron. Refining an ordinary pill cauldron would only result in one result, exploding on the spot. Now, it could be said that everything was ready. He only needed a pill cauldron. "My lord, please come with me." Xiaoning immediately led Yi Shiwen all the way to the depths of the Sky Star City. In the Sky Star City, the biggest trading company was naturally the Sky Merchant Chamber of Commerce established by the Sky Business Alliance. It was different from the simple stronghold on the Celestial Pole Island. In the Sky Star City, the Sky Merchant Chamber of Commerce's residence was extremely luxurious. It highlighted the status and financial resources of the Sky Merchant Chamber of Commerce. The entire Sky Merchant Chamber of Commerce was magnificent. Even the entire residence itself was formed by the incarnation of a huge magic weapon. When necessary, it could transform into a magic weapon and attack the opponent. Under Xiaoning's lead, Yi Shiwen arrived at the Sky Merchant Chamber of Commerce. Soon, a waiter came forward and asked, "May I know what this customer would like to buy?" "Let your manager come. I have a big business. It's not something you can handle," Yi Shiwen said slowly. He didn't mean to look down on this waiter. He was simply stating the facts. The waiter was a little embarrassed when he heard this. If any random person came up and said that he had a big business, they would be too busy to deal with it. "Are you afraid that I don't have enough financial resources?" Yi Shiwen smiled slightly and opened his palm. Suddenly, many dragon veins surged on Yi Shiwen's palm. It was a part of the dragon vein of the sky-devouring ominous python clan that Yi Shiwen had captured. However, without the dragon vein spirit, the original dragon veins suddenly split into hundreds of dragon veins. In fact, the dragon vein in the ancestral land of the sky-devouring ominous python clan was a super dragon vein formed by the forced fusion of many dragon veins. Now that there was no restriction from the dragon vein spirit, it naturally split on its own. The waiter's eyes widened when he saw so many dragon veins surging. He had never seen so many dragon veins in his life. It was simply beyond his imagination. He immediately understood that the person in front of him was definitely a big customer, a super big customer. "Please wait a moment, sir. I'll go and ask our manager to come over immediately." The waiter immediately turned around and left. Yi Shiwen casually showed so many dragon veins. Not only the waiter, but even Xiaoning, who was beside him, was shocked. Dragon veins were one of the basic foundations of the existence of a sect. It was the most important thing for a sect. Once a dragon vein was found, it might even trigger an unprecedented war between two sections. One could imagine the importance of dragon veins. She had never heard of using dragon veins as the basic capital for transactions. It was almost like a legend. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.